Gregor Clegane remembered nothing, and he remembered everything. There was a haze in his vision, a red mist behind his eyes that tinted the world in blood and fury, yet behind the crimson veil lurked a shred of something that had once been human. The rumors whispered in every corridor of the Red Keep were that Ser Gregor Clegane, known as the Mountain, was no more than a monster reanimated by Qyburn's twisted arts. An undead giant, an unthinking creature enslaved to the will of his new master. And so he was, until the night that faint flicker of consciousness turned into a single blazing ember. That ember began to burn inside Gregor's chest, and though his hands were still encased in cold gauntlets, though his face was hidden behind his visor of black steel, something alive stirred in him. He had stood guard outside Cersei Lannister's chambers for months in a near-catatonic state. Cersei, with her platinum hair and the burden of grief etched into the hard lines of her face, took comfort in the silent presence of the massive knight. She believed he was under her complete control through Qyburn's sorcery, bound to protect her and kill any threat that dared challenge the Lannister hold on the Iron Throne. The last vestiges of what had once been Gregor Clegane were presumed obliterated by poison, necromancy, and pain. She was certain of it. Qyburn was even more certain. Yet that night, as the wind whipped through the window's open shutters and carried the distant roar of the city beyond, Gregor found himself watching a lone candle flicker in Cersei's room. He listened to the sounds of her voice rattling off instructions, orders to Qyburn about the rumored approach of Daenerys Targaryen's forces, about how the city would be turned to ash before she would let the throne slip from her grasp. He heard them whisper of traps to be laid and the full range of wildfire caches hidden beneath King's Landing. He registered each word with perfect, monstrous stillness. But behind his eyes, a memory flickered. He once had a brother, a father, a keep of stone. He had known the burn of sunlight on unprotected flesh, the clang of steel in tourneys, the wild fear of horses rearing under him. He had known, once, what it was to be human. Qyburn's voice slithered through the darkness. The vaults are stuffed with wildfire. Once the Dragon Queen breaches the gates, we ignite the caches from the Red Keep's vantage. The city goes up, her along with it. We can always rebuild. His Grace's bloodline is what matters. The enemy must not inherit anything from us, not so much as an unburnt stone. From behind Qyburn, Cersei nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing at the candle's wavering flame. We'll watch it all burn if we must. The small folk will either die or flee, they are not my concern. As for Daenerys, she can choke on ash. Qyburn's crooked smile revealed a glint of satisfaction. I will oversee the preparations, Your Grace. With your permission, I'll take Ser Gregor here as added insurance in case your brother Tyrion attempts anything clever. Cersei's gaze flicked to the hulking figure in black armor. Yes, take him. Let him crush any opposition. Soon enough, none of this will matter. In the corridor beyond, torches hissed. When Qyburn turned from Cersei's chamber and beckoned Gregor to follow, the Mountain responded in his usual silent way, an obedient stride that shook the floor beneath him. He felt the heavy weight of his armor and the trapped heat inside. He felt that flicker in his chest grow to a hungry glow, but no one watching would guess it. They saw only an undead knight, a puppet of foul magic, unfeeling and unknowing. They descended through the winding corridors of the Red Keep, passing columns etched with the old Targaryen sigils, passing guarded corners where gold cloaks snapped to attention, passing the restless hush of a city preparing for war. Outside, the sky was dark, but the city's thousands of lights shimmered in the gloom. Even though it was nearly midnight, the folk below had no illusions that King's Landing would remain safe much longer. Whispers of incoming armies and dragons perched at the outskirts of the city had sown terror in every alley. It was a city on the brink. Qyburn led Gregor down 2 flights of stairs to a dimly lit chamber that stank of rot and chemicals. This was the apothecary's den, a place few visited and fewer survived. The flickering torchlight revealed stone tables with bodies covered by rough cloth, unidentifiable lumps glistening in shallow trays, and vials of unknown substances lining the shelves. Gregor's armor reflected the dim orange glow, turning him into a dark colossus. His helm concealed every feature but for a thin slit for vision. When Qyburn turned, the wave of his hand made the torchlight dance. Ser Gregor, Qyburn said in that measured tone he used with children and corpses. We have a long day ahead. The Queen trusts you will enforce her will. Even your ferocious strength may be tested. He examined the Mountain with a gaze that flashed with pride, as if admiring his own twisted creation. Let us make a small adjustment. He approached with an iron implement that glowed faintly from the furnace behind him. A sizzle of heat wavered in the air. Gregor stood motionless as Qyburn placed the tip of the metal along a seam in his armor, right beneath the gorget near his collarbone. There was a hiss and a wisp of smoke rose where metal touched flesh. The man who had once been Gregor felt pain or something akin to it. A memory of pain. But he did not move. The old Gregor would have roared, maybe struck out in reflex, but this new Gregor had taught himself not to flinch. He could not recall how many times Qyburn's blade or needle had tested him since his resurrection. Qyburn grinned in satisfaction as he completed the brand along that collar of dead flesh. "That will help keep you docile," he murmured. "A reinforcement of my will over yours. The older your body grows in this state, the more unpredictable the undead mind can become. We wouldn't want you forming any unfortunate impulses." He set aside the tool and dabbed at the searing wound with a clump of gauze soaked in a bitter-smelling solution. Gregor felt the sting, recognized the threat, but he still did not move. The ember inside him roared at the violation. He imagined ripping off Qyburn's head, crushing his skull between armored hands. Then that ember flickered and receded, covered by the layers of necromantic compulsion. He was stuck in a cage inside himself. Qyburn offered a satisfied nod, then gestured for Gregor to follow. They left the ghastly chamber and ventured deeper into the winding corridors until they reached a set of heavy oaken doors. Behind these doors lay a hidden vault that had once served as a storeroom for the Targaryens. Now, under Qyburn's watchful eye, it served as a workshop of destructive possibility. Torches lit up a stone room lined with large casks, each adorned with the alchemical symbol for wildfire. The casks were stacked in neat rows, a testament to the dreadful planning that had gone into this enterprise. Gregor smelled the acrid tang of the substance, a stench that bit at the insides of his nose even through the constraints of his helmet. Workers in plain brown robes moved carefully among the casks, adjusting the angles of fuses or double-checking the wax seals. Qyburn gave them instructions in hushed tones. They all averted their eyes from the mountain, for though they were well aware of Qyburn's experiments, the sight of Gregor's hulking form was enough to unsettle even the boldest. "I trust we'll be ready by dawn," Qyburn said to a jittery apprentice who nodded repeatedly. "Her Grace wants these caches placed strategically below street level. We set them off with a single spark from the Hill of Rainies, and the chain reaction will sweep the city's main avenues. There'll be no survivors for Daenerys to rally." Another robed figure stumbled over a cask, nearly tipping it. Gregor felt the tension ripple through the room as one misstep could unleash unimaginable carnage. But the man righted it quickly, trembling with sweat beading on his brow. Qyburn's eyes flashed with impatience, but he did not scold the man. Instead, he turned to Gregor. "Carry 3 casks to the outer tunnels. You know the path. No one will bar your way, for they fear you more than they fear my wrath." He paused, letting the words sink into the hush. "Soon, Gregor, the Queen will have full dominion, even if it comes at the cost of every life in the city. We must ensure everything is in place." Gregor moved. He bent his enormous shoulders and arms to scoop up 3 casks at once, one under each arm and a third balanced precariously in front of his chest. The watchers in the room gasped at this display. No normal man could have hoped to lift even 1 cask alone. Gregor's footfalls echoed ominously as he left the vault with his load. In the dark corridors, he moved like some unstoppable specter, carrying enough wildfire to level a row of homes. His footsteps pounded over the cobblestones of a lesser-known passageway that ran adjacent to the Red Keep's dungeons. Rats scattered in his wake. The glow of a single torch illuminated the path, throwing his huge shadow against the walls. The corridor led to an opening that overlooked the black waters of the Blackwater Bay on one side and the labyrinth of the city's catacombs on the other. At the first junction he paused, forced by the spell etched into his flesh to recall the route Qyburn had impressed upon him. He needed to descend a spiral stair, place the casks at the archway's base, then exit. He was about to do so when the ember in his mind flared and an image from a half-remembered life emerged. A village he had once burned in service to Tywin Lannister, a memory of peasants screaming as fire consumed them. He recalled children scurrying from doorways only to be cut down. He saw women collapsing to their knees in the mud begging. That day had stunk of terror and ash, and Gregor had felt a savage pride in his ability to inflict fear. Now he felt no pride, only the rising tide of an unfamiliar emotion, regret. That was what that flicker felt like, a pang of remorse that defied Qyburn's brand on his chest. He pictured again what wildfire would do to the city. He knew, with certainty, that Qyburn's plan would see thousands, tens of thousands, wiped away in seconds. And for the first time in his life, the brutality did not thrill him. Instead, it called up that ghost of who he had been before. Or perhaps it was something new, a spark of conscience that had never burned quite so bright. His gloved hands tightened around the casks. The brand on his collar seared as if punishing him for the disobedient thought. Numbness spread from that wound, attempting to smother the glow of free will, but Gregor found himself clinging to it, allowing it to feed off every memory of guilt, sorrow, or faint yearning for redemption. He was a puppet, yes, but perhaps even a puppet could cut the strings if it found the right blade. He lumbered down the spiral stairs, each step echoing like a drumbeat. The tunnel opened into a larger space with low ceilings. Here, the stone was ancient, the mortar crumbling in places. Weak lanterns hung from hooks, providing enough light to see the pathway twisting deeper into the ground. This was one of the many catacombs beneath King's Landing that Qyburn had intended to rig with wildfire. Gregor realized that if he set these casks here as ordered, the entire foundation of the Red Keep could catch, or worse, the blast could connect to other pockets of wildfire hidden around the city. Again, the brand flared, lancing him with pain that forced him to grunt, a deep, muffled sound that might have been a roar had his throat not been so ravaged. He was not allowed to think these thoughts. Qyburn's magic compelled him to obey. Obey and kill. Obey and protect. Obey. Gregor swung his gaze around, searching the darkness. No one was here but him. No watchful robed assistants, no gold cloaks. No Qyburn. The compulsion demanded that he place these casks and return, but the flicker inside refused. He let the casks slide down, carefully setting them on the stone floor. He took a step back. The brand burned hotter, searing, demanding compliance. He felt his breath hitch, a sound like a strangled animal. For a moment he was seized by conflicting energies, one that said put them down and walk away, the other that commanded him to place them exactly where Qyburn wanted. The supernatural force hammered at his skull. He remembered the screams of peasants, the crackling of fire in that ill-omened village. For once he did not want to be the cause of that horror. And so he resisted. Inch by inch, step by step, he wrested control from the necromantic bondage. His ironclad fists clenched, and he hammered them against the stone wall. A muffled roar tore free from his chest. And then the brand lost its hold, if only for a second. He let the casks rest where they were, not quite in the precise place Qyburn had dictated. He turned and left the corridor, forging a new path up a different staircase. He had no illusions about the consequences. Qyburn would check his work, would discover the casks misplaced. Qyburn might punish him or re-etch the brand a dozen times if need be. But for now he was free. And in that moment of freedom he felt the savage energy of his body coalesce into a single purpose: protect King's Landing. A bitter thought. All his life he had done nothing but destroy. But if he could defy Qyburn, if he could prevent the worst of this catastrophe, perhaps he could cling to that last spark of defiance long enough to do something that mattered. He ascended a stairwell that wound upward into an older, disused portion of the keep. Broken crates and barrels littered the halls. The musty smell of rat droppings mingled with the faint tang of mildew. This part of the castle was all but forgotten. Gregor paused to steady himself, pressing a massive gauntlet over the searing brand. He could almost feel the black magic warring with his flesh. He continued on, drawn by an impulse to find help or do something more direct to thwart Qyburn. He was not cunning in the ways of espionage. Stealth was never his forte. But brute force was. He turned a corner and nearly collided with Jaime Lannister, who stood transfixed, his single hand on the hilt of his sword. The Kingslayer's eyes went wide in the dim torchlight. He had come here by some private route. "Gods, you startled me," Jaime muttered, stepping back. "Gregor, are you on patrol?" The mountain did not speak, he simply loomed. Jaime's golden brow furrowed. He had never trusted Qyburn's creation, but until now he had believed it to be entirely under his sister's thrall. There was an odd tension that crackled in the air as Jaime's gaze dropped to the fresh burn seeping fluid along Gregor's collar, a wound that shouldn't matter to a man who was half dead already. Jaime's eyes narrowed. "What is this? Some new trick of Qyburn's?" he asked, half to himself. The mountain struggled to form words. It was a gargantuan effort to push breath through his ravaged throat. He raised one gauntlet hand as if to signal Jaime to wait. A guttural sound came out, a rasp, a broken attempt at speech. But in that moment, Jaime's posture shifted defensively. Gregor knew that the Gold Knight might draw his sword if threatened. Jaime Lannister was no match for the Mountain in a fair fight, but Gregor had no desire to fight him. Instead, he mustered all the will he had and slowly removed his hand from his sword hilt, raising both empty hands in a gesture of surrender. Jaime blinked. "Strange," he muttered, searching Gregor's visor for any sign of a living man behind it. Jaime's voice dropped low. "I have no love for you, you know that. But if you have something to show me, then do it quickly. The city stands on the brink of war, and I have no time for riddles." The Mountain gave a curt nod, his armor clanking. He turned and beckoned Jaime to follow. There was a hesitation, but curiosity got the better of the Kingslayer. He followed the undead knight down the corridor. They passed more broken crates, the debris of the keep's lesser-traveled wings. Each footstep set a swirl of dust into the air. Down one flight of stairs and into the gloom they went, neither speaking, the echo of armor and one-armed footsteps the only sound. At last, they reached the place where Gregor had left the 3 casks. Jamie's face turned pale at the sight of them. "Is that?" he asked, voice tense. Gregor gave a single, slow nod. Jamie's lips compressed as he approached carefully, kneeling to inspect the markings. One cask had partially loosened its lid, revealing the dreadful green shimmer. Jamie drew in a sharp breath. "7 hells," he whispered. "They've moved it already?" "All of it." Gregor's rasping breath was the only reply. Jamie rose, eyes dark with fear, and turned to face the behemoth. "You're telling me Qyburn is rigging the city with wildfire?" A pause. Then Gregor nodded. Jamie's memories of the Mad King's last hours must have flared in him. He took an unsteady breath. "My sister. She swore she'd never let Daenerys take the throne. But to burn the city to the ground, to kill everyone, that's madness. True Targaryen madness. I've seen it before." He swallowed. "I suppose I should have expected this. I tried to warn her. I tried to see if there was still reason in her." But he ran a hand over his stubbled jaw as though brushing away an unseen spider. "Cersei cares only for her power. She'd watch the city burn if she can't keep it, no matter how many innocent lives are lost." Gregor stepped closer to Jamie, looming so tall and broad that Jamie tensed. But the mountain merely reached out, grabbing Jamie's good shoulder with surprising gentleness, as if to convey that he, too, wanted to prevent this. Jamie's eyes widened. "I never thought I'd say this," Jamie murmured, "but if you're trying to stop Qyburn and Cersei from going through with this plan, I'm with you. By the gods, I must be mad as well." Gregor nodded again, and that single, stiff motion seemed to seal an uneasy alliance. Jamie was no fool, he knew the monster that Gregor Clegane was. But if the mountain was resisting Qyburn's hold, if he truly sought to stop the destruction of King's Landing, then Jamie could not ignore that chance. Quickly, Jamie replaced the cask lid, wiping sweat from his brow. "We have to hide these, or better yet, destroy them before Qyburn sets them in place. But there are surely more stashed around the city by now. Damn it all. We need help." Gregor grunted, a harsh, guttural sound that made Jamie grimace. Yet Jamie recognized it as agreement. The 2 men turned to leave the passage. As they ascended, Jamie seemed to struggle with a flurry of thoughts. "Tyrion might have a plan," he said under his breath. "Though he's with Daenerys, he still wants to save the people. And so does she if the rumors are true. She only wants the throne, not a city of ash." They rounded a corner, stepping into the dusty corridor once again. "We'll have to be careful," Jamie muttered. "Cersei has eyes everywhere. If she gets word that you have broken free or that I am conspiring against her, we'll be dead. But we can't just let this happen." Gregor rumbled once more, a terrifying sound, and Jamie nodded as if he understood. "Come on," he said, "we'll find someone we can trust." Quietly, they navigated the labyrinth of lesser-traveled hallways. The corridors were gloomier the deeper they went, until they reached a small courtyard that opened under the moonlight. An overgrown garden with broken statues offered a bit of cover. The air was cool, carrying the faint stench of smoke from the city's kilns. Beyond the walls, the restless hush of King's Landing hung like a question. Jamie led the mountain through a side gate guarded by only 2 Lannister soldiers. Normally, those men would be suspicious of a huge, armored figure sneaking out, but the moment they recognized the undead knight and the Kingslayer, they bowed in deference. Jamie offered a tight smile and a quick nod, and the pair slipped into the night. Outside the walls, they carefully avoided major thoroughfares, ducking through narrow backstreets. Even at this late hour, clusters of fearful citizens lingered by shuttered shops, trading rumors about the Dragon Queen's arrival. Children cried softly in doorways, mothers tried to hush them. The tension was everywhere. Eyes darted to the mountain's towering form, but no one dared challenge him. At length, Jamie paused in front of a modest structure near the city's southwestern edge, a nondescript house with no lamp in the window. He knocked 3 times, paused, and knocked twice more. After a tense moment, the door opened to reveal Bronn of the Blackwater, scowling in annoyance. He wore a loose tunic and had a dagger in hand. "Bloody hells," Bronn grunted. "Couldn't you pick a better hour?" He caught sight of Gregor behind Jamie and tensed. "What in the 7 devils is that?" Jamie pushed inside, Gregor ducking through the low doorway with surprising care. The front room was sparsely furnished, a single table and a few chairs. Bronn shut the door, eyeing the mountain warily. "If you brought that thing here to kill me, you'll regret it, even if I only have a few seconds to do so." Jamie shook his head. No, we're here because something far bigger than a mercenary's life is at stake. Listen, you've heard about Qyburn's wildfire scheme? Bronn rubbed his unshaven jaw. I've heard rumors. Everyone's heard them, but no one believes the Queen would be crazy enough to do it, at least not on a large scale. His dark eyes flicked to the mountain. Is that puppet here to confirm or deny? Jaime explained swiftly. Cersei and Qyburn have casks of wildfire hidden beneath the city. We've seen them. They mean to blow King's Landing if Daenerys attacks. Innocent or guilty, it doesn't matter, they'll burn alive. We have to stop it. Ser Gregor brought me to the caches. Bronn stared at Jaime as though he'd just grown an extra head. Then he barked a humorless laugh. You mean the mountain had a sudden change of heart? I never figured the beast had a heart to begin with. And yet here we stand, Jaime said, glancing over his shoulder at the hulking figure who stood near the door, silent and still, the candlelight dancing over his armor. Strange times indeed. I need your help, Bronn. I need to find a way to sabotage this. We can't let them blow the city to the heavens. Bronn exhaled. You're speaking treason, my lord. Is it treason to save people from a mad plan? The Queen is the one practicing treason against reason. If we fail to act, every man, woman, and child in King's Landing could die. Bronn crossed his arms. He seemed to weigh the risks. You're probably right. But what can we do? The Queen has the Red Keep locked down and Qyburn controls that. He jerked his chin at Gregor. But apparently that's no longer true? Jaime nodded. Gregor is resisting Qyburn's control. I don't know how long it will last. The brand on his chest is still there and Qyburn might reinforce it. But for now we have him on our side. We can use his strength. Maybe we can sabotage the stockpiles of wildfire, or warn Daenerys, or both. If we do nothing, the city will become a graveyard. Bronn considered for a moment, then walked to his cupboard and retrieved a small jug of ale. He took a swig, wiped his mouth, and said, all right, I'm in. I like living here, my coins here, my taverns, my potential castle. I'm not keen on it exploding under my feet. But we'd better move quickly. Qyburn is probably layering the city with casks as we speak. Jaime managed a weary grin. We'll start with the hidden vaults in the keep. We can't possibly remove or disarm them all, but if we sabotage enough of them, or at least their ignitions, Qyburn's grand chain reaction might fail. Maybe only a small portion goes off instead of the entire city. Bronn snorted. Lovely thought, but if one cask goes, there's still a good chance it'll set off every other one within range. We have to be clever about this. Maybe we can rig a few casks to blow early, right under the Red Keep, so Qyburn and Cersei get a taste of their own medicine. But the rest of the city might still stand a chance. Jaime swallowed hard. That's still going to kill hundreds, maybe thousands. Less than tens of thousands, Bronn retorted. And better them than the entire city. You know Cersei. There's no turning her from this course unless we remove her from the board entirely. And with that monster, he pointed to Gregor. No offense. But with that monster on our side, we might make it happen. A raspy exhale echoed from Gregor's helmet almost like a sigh. Jaime glanced at the undead knight. He wants to protect King's Landing, or so it seems. Maybe it's redemption. Maybe it's some twisted reflex. I don't know. But if we can figure out how to direct that, we stand a chance. Bronn let out a low whistle. Never thought I'd see the day when the mountain would be my ally. Strange bedfellows indeed. They hurried out of the house with Bronn leading the way this time. He slipped into the shadows, guiding them through the less patrolled alleyways. Every once in a while, they passed a group of Lannister guards or a pair of gold cloaks, but the presence of Ser Gregor was often enough to deter any questions. If a guard did muster up the courage to speak, Jaime would flash his golden hand and spin a quick tale about running an errand for the Queen. It was not far from the truth, but with a sinister twist that no guard suspected. Eventually, they made their way back toward the Red Keep, though from a different route. This one led through an old postern gate that was rarely used, though the lock was presumably still functional. Bronn picked it in a matter of seconds, cursing under his breath about the poor quality of Lannister security. They slipped inside. Torches crackled in the passage, and the distant tramp of guards' boots echoed from above. Jaime signaled for silence, and the trio moved slowly, carefully, deeper into the keep's subterranean network. Here, the walls were damp with condensation, and algae clung to the stones near ground level. The air was heavy with a sense of foreboding. When they reached a small intersection, Jaime paused to orient himself. If I recall, Qyburn's main operation is in a vault 2 corridors east of here. He gestured. We go that way, we might run right into his workers. Are we ready for a fight? Bronn's grin was mirthless. I'm always ready for a fight, so long as the big guy here goes first. Gregor stood like a statue, silent, perhaps in agreement. The brand on his collar still sizzled now and then, making him twitch, but he seemed determined. Jamie took the lead, one hand on his sword hilt, the other brushing the cold stone walls for balance. They came upon a door flanked by two silent-robed figures, Qyburn's assistants. The men looked pale and exhausted, their eyes ringed with shadows. They noticed Jaime Lannister, recognized Ser Gregor, and quickly bowed their heads. "My lord," one mumbled, stepping aside. Jaime forced a casual nod. "We have orders from Qyburn. Let us in." The second man hesitated. "What orders? Do you question the Kingslayer?" snapped Bronn. "Open the damned door." The men exchanged glances, then opened the door. Jaime, Bronn, and Gregor filed inside, stepping into a large vault illuminated by multiple torches. The floor was lined with casks, all stamped with the symbol for wildfire. Qyburn was there, conferring with 3 more assistants over a wooden table strewn with maps and ledgers. He looked up the moment they entered, eyes flaring with cold surprise. "Lord Jaime," Qyburn said smoothly, though tension coiled in his voice. "I was not expecting you at this hour." His gaze slid to Bronn, then to the mountain. "Did you complete your assignment, Ser Gregor?" He asked the question almost rhetorically, expecting no direct answer from the undead knight. Then his eyes hardened. "Why did you bring them here?" Bronn let out a mocking chuckle. "Ser Gregor's just being thorough. We heard you're stashing quite a bit of wildfire here, and we're, shall we say, a bit concerned about it." Qyburn's lips curled, revealing a flash of white teeth. "I assure you, the Queen's plan is well in hand." "There's no need for your concern, Selsword." Jaime stepped forward. "No need for concern? Thousands of innocent lives hang in the balance. Do you expect me to stand aside and watch you burn them all?" One of Qyburn's assistants stiffened. "My lord, this is in service to the crown. Do you question the Queen's will?" Jaime's golden hand tightened into a fist. "I question the sense in turning this city into a funeral pyre. And I question it deeply." Qyburn's face went still. "The city is lost if Daenerys takes it. We cannot allow that to happen. The Queen has authorized me to do what must be done." Bronn snorted. "What must be done? So you'll murder them all just so you can say Daenerys never took the city alive?" Gregor stepped forward, then, an imposing silhouette that dwarfed everyone else. Qyburn frowned. "Ser Gregor, place these intruders under arrest," he commanded, raising a hand as though bestowing a new order. Jaime and Bronn tensed, swords half-drawn. The mountain did not move to arrest them. Instead, he loomed behind Jaime, forming a bulwark of steel. Qyburn's face flickered with confusion. He raised his hand again. "Ser Gregor, I command you, seize them." "Nothing." The robed assistants shifted uneasily. One of them reached for a dagger on the table, but his hands were trembling. Qyburn's voice rose. "You cannot defy me. The brand compels you to obey. Remember who brought you back from death, Ser Gregor." Gregor's helmet creaked as if his head was turning left and right. Then, in a burst of savage motion, he lunged forward, grabbing Qyburn by his collar and lifting him clear off the ground. Qyburn let out a strangled cry. The assistants scrambled back in horror. The brand on Gregor's flesh flared, sending waves of agony through his body, but he held on. This was the ultimate test of his will. He roared, a muffled, monstrous sound that filled the vault. Qyburn's eyes bulged. "Release me. You, abomination." He clawed at Gregor's gauntlet. The brand sizzled again, furious black magic struggling to force compliance, but Gregor had found that ember of conscience, that shred of humanity, and it roared brighter. With a single savage motion, he hurled Qyburn across the room. The old man slammed into a row of casks, the breath whooshing out of him. Jaime and Bronn drew their swords as Qyburn's assistants rushed forward, brandishing daggers. Gregor pivoted, unstoppable, and swung a gargantuan fist. One assistant went flying into a table. Another stumbled only to meet Bronn's flashing steel. Jaime parried a third's frantic slash, twisted around, and disarmed him with practiced ease. The robed man screamed, cowering. Meanwhile, Qyburn crawled away from the casks, coughing violently. His eyes burned with hate as he realized that his monstrous creation had slipped free of his control. "You," he hissed, trembling fingers searching the floor for a weapon or a tool or anything to reassert his power. Gregor advanced on him, each step reverberating through the stone floor. Qyburn found a small knife and brandished it, though it seemed almost laughable against Gregor's bulk. "You would betray your creator?" Qyburn spat, voice quivering with a mixture of rage and fear. No words came from Gregor, but his posture, the set of his shoulders, the angle of his visor, all radiated a newfound purpose. He reached Qyburn, and with one swift motion, crushed the man's feeble attempt to stab him. Qyburn's wrist snapped under the crushing force. His scream echoed off the walls. But Gregor did not kill him instantly. Instead, as if from some well of memory, he placed a gargantuan hand around Qyburn's throat and pinned him against the casks. Jaime and Bronn dispatched the last of the assistants. Blood trickled onto the stones, the torches flickered, and silence fell. A heavy, terrible silence. Jaime approached Gregor carefully, half expecting the mountain to revert to his old ways of mindless brutality. Yet Gregor only tightened his grip enough to keep Qyburn from speaking, from chanting some dark incantation. "Do we kill him?" Bronn asked, voice flat. Jaime's lips twisted. "He's too dangerous to live. He'll only try to set off the caches or bring the queen into this." From beneath Gregor's hand, Qyburn sputtered, "Cersei. We'll burn it all anyway. She's too far gone. She'll do it with or without me." That rocked Jaime for a moment, because Qyburn was probably telling the truth. Even if they killed him, Cersei might order another to ignite the wildfire at the first sight of Daenerys's armies. Gregor growled, as if in agreement with Jaime's unspoken dread. Bronn wiped his sword on a fallen man's robe. "Then we go to the source. We either convince her to stand down or we do what must be done." His tone carried no pleasure in the prospect. Jaime looked at Qyburn with loathing. "We can't leave him alive." Gregor responded by lifting the frail man higher. Qyburn's eyes rolled back, panic thrumming in every line of his face. Jaime could not bring himself to feel pity. With ruthless finality, Gregor tightened his hold. There was a sickening crunch. Qyburn's struggles ceased. His body went limp, and Gregor let it drop to the floor like a broken puppet. A hush followed, filled only by the crackling of the torches. Bronn exhaled. "Well, that's that." Jaime stared at the corpse for a moment, then nodded. "We need to move. More of Qyburn's men might be lurking about. Or Cersei's personal guard. We have to get to her." Gregor stooped, his massive frame overshadowing Qyburn's remains. He stared at the broken body for a moment, as though verifying it was indeed lifeless. The brand on his chest no longer seared with that furious heat. Perhaps with Qyburn's death, some of the immediate compulsion had lifted. But that did not mean all of it was gone. The necromantic magic might remain in his flesh like an infection. For now, though, he was free enough. The trio moved quickly. Bronn found a small cask of oil near the wall and poured it over the stacked crates containing Qyburn's ledgers and notes. He tossed a torch onto them and flames crackled to life, consuming the evidence of Qyburn's vile experiments. Jaime gestured at the casks of wildfire. "We can't leave these here, but we can't move them safely ourselves. Let's sabotage the fuses." He and Bronn hastily cut or removed the fuses that connected the casks, hoping to prevent a chain reaction if someone lit one. Gregor stood guard, eyeing the door. When the job was done, Jaime nodded, breath coming fast. "We'll come back with reinforcements or let the city watch handle them once Cersei is removed. For now, we must hurry." They exited into the corridor, making their way upward toward the main halls of the Red Keep. Their plan was half-formed, but necessity drove them. If Cersei truly intended to blow the city, they had to confront her before Daenerys's forces arrived in full. They needed more allies, or else a direct approach might be suicide. Yet Jaime's resolve was iron. He had once killed a king to save King's Landing from wildfire. He would do it again, even if that king wore a queen's crown. In the twisting corridors above, they encountered gold cloaks stationed at strategic intervals. Jaime bluffed their way past some, while Gregor's looming presence ensured that none dared insist on following. As they neared the throne room, they overheard the clipped commands of the Queen's Guard, though that force was greatly diminished after so many betrayals and desertions. Most of Cersei's best men had died in the recent wars, leaving a skeleton retinue behind. They slipped into a side chamber that adjoined the throne room's great doors. From within, they could hear the echoes of Cersei's voice as she spoke to a small gathering, perhaps generals or nobles still loyal to her. Jaime and Bronn pressed themselves against the wall, straining to hear. Gregor stood behind them, silent. His presence loomed like a silent threat. "Daenerys will be at our gates by dawn," Cersei was saying, her tone venomous. "We will not surrender. She and her Unsullied, her Dothraki, her dragons, let them come. The city is well prepared." A timid voice responded, "But your grace, the people, if you ignite the caches, tens of thousands will." Silence, Cersei snapped. They will understand that I do this for the realm. The Dragon Queen must not sit on the Iron Throne. We will do whatever it takes. A heavy stillness followed. Jaime's jaw tightened. He exchanged a glance with Bronn. The Sellsword shrugged as if to say, "Are you surprised?" Jaime sighed silently and inched closer to the door. He peeked inside. Cersei stood at the foot of the Iron Throne wearing a gown of black velvet. Her hair was cropped short, her eyes fierce with unwavering resolve. Around her stood a handful of advisors, some minor lords, a few knights. The hall was lit by a dozen torches, casting flickering shadows on the ancient stone columns. Jaime took a breath and turned to Bronn and Gregor. "Let's do it," he whispered. They entered with measured strides. The hall wasn't crowded. The watchers turned at once, shock and unease evident on their faces. Cersei's eyes narrowed when she saw Jaime, but her gaze flicked beyond him to the mountain, and confusion rippled across her features. "Jaime?" she demanded. "What is the meaning of this? Why are you skulking about with Qyburn's creation?" Jaime pressed on, ignoring her question. He stopped a short distance from where she stood. "Cersei, I beg you to reconsider. We know of the wildfire caches. We know you mean to burn the city if Daenerys attacks. This must end." Murmurs spread among the lords. Cersei's face twisted into a snarl. "You dare challenge me? I am your queen, Jaime. You may be my brother, but I will not tolerate this insolence." He lifted his chin. "A king once tried to do the same. Burn King's Landing with wildfire. Cut him down. I saved 500,000 lives. Do not make me do it again." Gasps echoed. Cersei's knuckles went white around the folds of her gown. "Are you threatening me with the same fate as Aerys Targaryen?" "If you choose the same path," Jaime said, voice trembling slightly, "you leave me no choice." A wave of raw fury swept over Cersei's features. She snapped at the knights around her. "Seize him!" 3 knights moved forward, but Gregor stepped in front of Jaime, a wall of steel that dwarfed them all. They froze at the sight of him, uncertain how to proceed. Everyone in the Red Keep knew the Mountain's reputation, and none relished the thought of fighting him in close quarters. Cersei pointed at the Mountain, voice shaking with rage. "Ser Gregor, obey your queen. Kill Jaime Lannister." A hush fell. The knights waited, expecting the dreaded giant to step forward and commit fratricide at the queen's command. Instead, Gregor stood rigid, his visor facing Cersei. He did not move. He did not speak. One of the knights trembled. "Your Grace, I don't think it obeys you." Cersei's eyes widened and her lips parted in stunned fury. "Qyburn assured me." She froze, glancing around as if to summon her Grand Maester, only to realize he was not present. "Where's Qyburn? What have you done to him?" Silence. Then Jaime spoke, his voice solemn. "He's gone, Cersei, and the Mountain is no longer your puppet." Cersei's eyes burned with raw hatred. "You killed him." Jaime did not deny it. He was going to blow the city. He would have followed your orders without question, unleashing wildfire on thousands of innocents. "We couldn't let that happen." The knights exchanged glances, uncertain. Some seemed horrified, others uncertain of their queen's mental state. The tension in the air could be cut with a dagger. Cersei's breath came in ragged bursts. "You ungrateful, I am your queen. I have done everything for this family, and you betray me." She fixed a glare on Jaime. "Did you learn nothing from father? Power is all that matters." A memory of Tywin Lannister's harsh lessons flickered in Jaime's mind. He felt an echo of that shame and realized that for too long he had been shaped by his father's and sister's manipulations. "No, Cersei," he said quietly. "This madness must end." She let out a bitter laugh. "So the Kingslayer wants to be the Queenslayer, is that it?" The knights shuffled and one of the minor lords murmured a protest. Bronn, standing behind Gregor, hissed, "We can't talk her down, Jaime. She's too far gone." Cersei whipped her gaze to the side, eyes flaring. "You dare?" She turned back, searching for an ally among her advisors. "Lord Tarly, Lord Hayford, arrest these traitors." But the lords hesitated, looking at the Mountain and recalling the savage way he had killed men before. Some of them took a tentative step back. Jaime clenched his jaw. "Cersei, I don't want this. But if you insist on blowing up King's Landing, I will stop you." She drew herself up, her trembling hands clenched in fists. "You can try," she spat. "Guards, with me." She spun on her heel and strode toward a side exit, presumably to rally more loyalists or find a way to ignite the wildfire from another vantage. Half a dozen men scrambled to follow, leaving Jamie, Bronn, and Gregor to chase. Jamie cursed under his breath. Don't let her escape. She'll find some other way. He, Bronn, and the mountain rushed after her, leaving the confused knights behind. They dashed down a corridor that led to another set of stairs. Cersei, swift in her fury, had a head start. They heard her shouting orders to random guards. Jamie caught sight of her black gown whipping around a corner. They sprinted, ignoring the confusion of servants and nobles scurrying out of the way. At the next turn, they found 4 Lannister guards forming a line. "Stop!" the guard captain roared, leveling a spear. But Gregor crashed into them like a moving wall, scattering them with raw force. One guard was slammed against the wall, another was knocked unconscious in a single blow. Jamie and Bronn sidestepped the chaos, continuing after the fleeing queen. Cersei burst through a pair of double doors and emerged on a balcony overlooking the Red Keep's central courtyard. The full moon cast pale light across the stone expanse. Below, a handful of archers and guards looked up in alarm as she ran to the parapet, scanning for something or someone. Jamie, Bronn, and Gregor rushed onto the balcony seconds later. Cersei whirled, her eyes red-rimmed with anger and desperation. "Stay back!" she screamed, voice echoing in the night air. She raised a hand holding a single torch that she must have grabbed from a sconce in the corridor. "If you come any closer, I'll give the signal." Jamie's heart pounded. He remembered the hidden archers that sometimes guarded this balcony. He remembered the potential for a single flaming arrow to be shot into some distant tower where a fuse might await. She was desperate enough to do it. He slowed, hands raised in a conciliatory gesture. "Cersei, don't. Please." She trembled. "I would rather see it all burn than let Daenerys have it." Bronn's gaze flicked to the courtyard below. He could see archers stirring, uncertain. One of them, wearing the red and gold of House Lannister, was already lifting a bow as if to protect the queen. Bronn hissed at Jamie, "We're sitting ducks out here." Behind them, Gregor stood with fists clenched. His presence loomed in the moonlight, almost spectral. Cersei's eyes flicked to her once loyal champion, her lips curling with disgust. "Why have you turned against me?" she whispered, half to herself. "Qyburn said you were mine, body and soul." A low growl issued from Gregor's helm. Whether or not she understood that sound, Cersei showed no sign of fear. She was beyond fear, she was in the grip of despair and wrath. She stepped backward, pressing herself against the parapet, the torch in her hand guttering in the night breeze. Below, the city lights twinkled. King's Landing spread out like a slumbering beast, oblivious to the mortal danger. Jamie took a step forward, trying to maintain calm. "Cersei, you'll die too if you ignite it. You won't survive." A scornful, haunted laugh left her lips. "Better to die a queen than live as nothing." Bronn's eyes darted to the archers below. "Jamie, we have seconds." Jamie swallowed. He tried one last time. "We can find another way. Surrender. Negotiate with Daenerys. Tyrion will help mediate. Don't throw everything away." She stared at him, her jaw clenched so tightly that he thought her teeth might crack. Then, with a sudden move, she hurled the torch over the parapet. It spun end over end, trailing sparks through the night air. Time seemed to slow. Bronn cursed loudly. Jamie lunged for the parapet, leaning over to see where the torch might land. If it fell into a safe spot, they had a chance. But if Qyburn or Cersei had prepared a cunning line of wildfire fuses to the courtyard, even a single spark could start the chain reaction. The archers below scrambled, one of them stumbling as the torch plummeted dangerously close. Jamie's heart hammered. Gregor stepped forward as if ready to leap off the balcony itself. Down the torch fell. It landed on a patch of bare stone, bouncing once, sparks flaring. An instant hush gripped them. It sputtered out. Cersei stared down, disbelief rippling through her features. She looked as though she couldn't comprehend that her final gambit had failed. Jamie breathed again, though the tension still twisted his gut. At any second, an archer might relight the torch or shoot a flaming arrow. But Gregor moved. With shocking agility for such a massive figure, he barreled forward, crossing the balcony in 2 strides and sweeping Cersei away from the parapet. She let out a shrill cry as he seized her, lifting her off her feet. The archers below raised their bows, uncertain whether to fire on their own queen's champion. Gregor held Cersei, preventing her from any further attempts to signal. Jamie rushed to the railing, shouting down. "Stand down." By order of the Lord Commander of the Queen's Guard. That was an old title he had once borne. He had since forsaken it, but the archers recognized him. Confusion danced across their faces. Some lowered their bows. Others looked to one another for clarity. Cersei struggled in Gregor's hold, shrieking. You cannot do this. I am the queen. But there was a desperateness to her words, a tremor that hinted at her crumbling composure. Bronn came beside Jaime panting. Now what? We've got her, but half the city might still be rigged to blow. We can't hold her forever. Jaime's mind raced. We find Tyrion. He's near the outskirts with Daenerys. We can warn them. Maybe they can help disarm the caches or at least coordinate so no spark ignites them. I need to get her out of the city somewhere she can't cause more harm. Bronn's brow furrowed. That means we have to bring her to Daenerys as a prisoner? Cersei heard this and let out a scream of rage. Never. I will not kneel to that foreign whore. Gregor tightened his grip and she gasped, losing her breath. Jaime watched, eyes filled with a strange sadness. Cersei, you leave us no choice. In the moonlight, with the city sprawled below, the group was momentarily at an impasse. Then footsteps approached from behind. Several Lannister guards burst onto the balcony, swords drawn. They stopped short, seeing the queen pinned by the monstrous knight, Jaime and Bronn standing beside them. The guards looked stunned, uncertain whom to obey. Jaime held up a hand. Stop. No more bloodshed. Listen carefully, the queen was about to blow the city with wildfire. We've stopped her. She's not to be harmed, but she is no longer in command. The guard captain's face was a rictus of confusion. My lord, your sister is the queen. Yes, Jaime said steadily, but her actions would have killed you all. The city is rigged to burn. Help us prevent it. Please. One guard looked close to panicking. Another lowered his sword. The captain hesitated, then said, We serve House Lannister, but not this madness. He turned to his men. Stand down. Cersei's head whipped around. Traitors. You are all traitors. The men flinched under the weight of her fury, but they did not move to free her. Jaime stepped forward, taking a key ring from the guard captain's belt. We'll need restraints. The captain handed him a pair of iron shackles, his face pale. Jaime approached Gregor, carefully clasping the shackles around Cersei's wrists. She tried to kick him, spit at him, but Gregor's hold made that largely futile. Tears streaked her face, not of sorrow but of incandescent rage. Once her hands were bound, Gregor let her feet touch the floor, though he still held her in an iron grip. Jaime addressed the guards, spread the word, do not ignite any flames near the vaults or cellars. If you see Qyburn's robed men, detain them. We must stop any attempt to set off the wildfire. The guards saluted and hurried off to carry out the order. Bronn watched them leave, letting out a soft whistle. We might just pull this off, he murmured. Jaime swallowed, turning his gaze to his sister. She stared back at him with an expression of utter betrayal, tears of fury shining in her eyes. In that moment, Jaime felt the final severing of a bond that had once defined his life. He saw that there was no saving her from her own hatred. The only question that remained was whether saving King's Landing would damn him or redeem him. For Gregor, though, the choice had been made. He stood, restraining the queen he once served, the ember of conscience burning in what remained of his soul. If a monster like him could defy the horrors he'd once embraced, perhaps there was hope yet that the city could be spared. They set off down the corridor, Jaime in the lead, Cersei struggling in Gregor's grip, and Bronn trailing behind. Their destination was the main gate, where they could slip out of the city before dawn, find Tyrion, and parley with Daenerys. Jaime knew that once they handed over the queen, Daenerys might demand retribution. He knew Cersei's fate hung by a thread. But at least the city would still stand. The people, for once, would be spared. They made haste through the dim corridors. On the floors below, Lannister guards had already begun rounding up Qyburn's remaining assistants. Word of the queen's arrest spread swiftly, sowing confusion among soldiers and small folk. Despite the chaos, many recognized Jaime Lannister, once Lord Commander of the King's Guard, leading the dethroned queen in chains. Gregor's presence parted any crowd like a scythe through wheat. No one dared obstruct them. Somewhere near the courtyard, they passed a group of frightened servants who cowered at the sight of their queen, bound and furious. Cersei spat curses at them, but Gregor pushed her onward without pause. Jaime tried to avoid meeting their eyes. This was a grim spectacle, but it was necessary to stop the madness. At the gates of the Red Keep, the portcullis stood half-lowered. Outside, the city streets stretched out in the pale moonlight. Jaime paused, speaking to the guards, ensuring they understood not to let anyone ignite any flames near suspicious barrels or casks. News was spreading of the wildfire plot, and tension mounted with every breath. Yet for now, the city did not burn. Dawn would come soon, bringing Daenerys Targaryen's forces. Jaime only hoped they still had time to negotiate a bloodless entry. Accompanied by a small escort of guards loyal to Jaime's cause, they led Cersei through the winding streets. Disbelief rippled through the small folk who peeked from windows and doorways, seeing their queen a prisoner of her own brother and champion. Some whispered the word traitor. Others watched in silence, too afraid to speak. At one point, a group of ragged peasants threw rotten fruit at Cersei, venting their frustration and terror at her cruelty. Gregor shielded her from the worst of it. Oddly enough, his giant form, once a weapon of intimidation, had become a protective bulwark to ensure she was delivered alive. They reached the mud gate just as the horizon began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Beyond the walls, they saw a haze that might have been campfires or the silhouettes of Daenerys's unsullied host. The city watchmen posted there looked shocked at the sight of Jaime leading Cersei in chains, but upon recognizing the hush of potential civil war, they let them pass. Outside the gates, the fields stretched toward the horizon. The faint glow of torches marked the perimeter of Daenerys's forces. Jaime felt a hard knot in his gut as they approached. He glanced at Cersei. She had gone silent, eyes red from weeping and fury. Gregor's grip had not slackened, but he did not hurt her. The brand on his chest no longer seared, as though Qyburn's death had lifted the immediate compulsion. Still, black magic clung to him like a disease. They marched across the field, the Lannister guards in a wary cluster, Bronn scanning the darkness for threats. Dawn crept up, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange. Finally, they saw movement ahead. Several rows of unsullied soldiers emerged in disciplined formation, spears at the ready. The Lannister contingent halted, raising their hands in a gesture of parley. A figure on horseback approached, Grey Worm, his face impassive. He eyed Jaime, then Bronn, then the huge shape that was Gregor Clegane, and finally his gaze settled on the chained queen. His brow furrowed and he spoke in a firm voice, "Explain." Jaime took a breath, stepping forward. "I am Jaime Lannister. I come to surrender the queen to Daenerys Targaryen and to beg her to spare King's Landing. We have stopped her from igniting the wildfire caches. The city can still be saved if you do not attack." Grey Worm stared, expression unreadable. He glanced at Cersei, who glared back with smoldering resentment. He studied Gregor, who stood silent as a tomb. Then he motioned for his guards. "You will surrender your weapons. The queen will decide your fate." Jaime nodded, removing his sword and tossing it to the ground. Bronn did the same. The Lannister guards hesitated but followed suit. Gregor, for his part, had no interest in metal weapons beyond the pieces of armor fused to his body. He remained still. The Unsullied parted ranks, forming a corridor that led deeper into the camp. Jaime could see rows of tents, cooking fires, banners. The beating of distant war drums thudded on the edge of hearing. They were escorted by spear points through the camp, with soldiers eyeing them warily. Gregor's size and infamous reputation caused many hushed gasps. Some recognized Cersei, the fallen queen, and spat curses in Valyrian. Jaime kept his head high, though his heart pounded. One misstep and 100 spears would run them through. Finally, they arrived at the largest tent at the heart of the camp. Grey Worm dismounted and nodded to Jaime. Inside. Jaime swallowed. He, Bronn, Gregor, and the bound Cersei stepped inside, flanked by Unsullied. The tent interior was spacious, lined with rugs and a large war table in the center, covered in maps. Standing behind the table was Daenerys Targaryen, clad in a dark cloak, her silver-gold hair braided intricately. Beside her stood Tyrion Lannister, wearing a grim expression that shifted to shock upon seeing Jaime and Cersei in such a state. Daenerys's violet eyes darted from Jaime to Cersei to the monstrous knight. She noticed the chains on Cersei's wrists, the battered look on Jaime's face, and the absolute silence of Gregor. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, though her voice held more curiosity than anger. Jaime stepped forward, ignoring the unsullied spears that hovered near. "Your Grace, I come to you as a supplicant. My sister, the Queen, planned to burn King's Landing with wildfire rather than let it fall into your hands. We've stopped her. She is no longer Queen." He gestured to Cersei, who stood trembling with fury. Gregor's iron grip still encircled her arm. "We beg you to spare the city. It's rigged with casks of wildfire, but if you give us time, we can dismantle them." Tyrion moved around the table, his mismatched eyes flickering with shock. "Cersei, in chains. I never thought I'd see the day." He then turned to Jaime. "You actually defied her?" Jaime nodded. "She left me no choice. It was all or nothing. She would have killed everyone." Daenerys lifted her chin. "I have heard enough rumors of Cersei's madness to believe that. But to see her bound by her own champion is surprising indeed." Her gaze swept over Gregor, a flicker of revulsion crossing her face. "I remember how your creature beheaded my noble ally in the last parley." A tremor passed through Gregor, as if acknowledging the monstrous act. Jaime inclined his head. "He is free from Qyburn's control, your Grace. He's the one who showed us the caches. Without his help, we might not have discovered them in time. Tyrion eyed the giant knight warily. A strange turn of events. But we'll verify your claims. If there is indeed wildfire placed throughout the city, we must be extremely careful. One spark could destroy everything, including your own armies. Daenerys tapped her fingers on the table. Where's Qyburn now? Dead, Jaime said bluntly. He died refusing to abandon the plan. The queen's eyes flicked to Cersei, whose silence had shifted to a tremulous scorn. And what do you propose we do with her? You say she's no longer queen, but that does not erase her crimes. Before Jaime could speak, Tyrion intervened, voice tight. She must stand trial, your grace. We can present the evidence of her attempt to destroy the city. Let the people see that justice is done. Daenerys weighed that. A trial, yes. But she is dangerous. She will be kept under heavy guard. If one of my dragons sees a single attempt by her to incite destruction, she will burn. Cersei snarled, you have no right. She tried to lunge at Tyrion, but Gregor's grip was firm. Her voice cracked. You pathetic dwarf, you sold out your own family. And you, she turned to Jaime, tears glistening in her furious eyes. You are no better than father-killing scum. I should have known. Tyrion's face tightened, but he simply said, spoken like the monstrous sibling I know all too well. Daenerys signaled to her Unsullied, who stepped forward to take custody of Cersei. Gregor relinquished her arm, and they forced her to her knees. Her chains rattled. She shook with rage, staring daggers at Jaime. And Tyrion. Jaime turned to Daenerys, forcing calm into his voice. Your grace, she is yours. But please, promise me you will let us secure the wildfire before you make your move on the city. Any stray spark. Daenerys inclined her head slowly. I have no desire to rule ashes. If your intentions are genuine, you may return under my flag of truce and help dismantle these caches. My men will assist. I'll send the Unsullied into the city to maintain order. Tyrion nodded. That would be wise. We can keep the people calm while we methodically disarm each stash. Daenerys's expression was guarded. And what of him? She looked pointedly at Gregor, who stood unmoving. He is a vile creation. What place does he have in the new order, if any? A flicker of pity crossed Tyrion's face. Jaime glanced at Gregor. The giant knight bowed his head slightly as if bracing for a sentence. Jaime found himself speaking on Gregor's behalf. He helped us save the city. In his own way, he's seeking redemption. Or perhaps it's just vestigial loyalty to life. But I know this, without him, we'd be in flames already. Daenerys pursed her lips. Very well. Let him remain under guard as well until we decide what to do with him. If he truly means to save the city, let him prove it by dismantling the very threat he once carried. Agreed, Jaime said quietly. Thus, in the pink light of dawn, the captors and the captive found themselves allied in the name of saving King's Landing. The city that had once feared the mountain as a butcher now depended on him to locate and neutralize the hidden wildfire caches. Tyrion gathered a handful of Daenerys's top advisors, preparing a plan of action. Jaime and Bronn, along with a contingent of Unsullied, would re-enter the city, systematically removing or rendering harmless every cask of wildfire they could find. Gregor would guide them as he had seen Qyburn's secret stash points. Cersei was taken away in chains, silent now except for an occasional hiss of rage. Grey Worm personally oversaw her escort to a makeshift prison tent, ringed by Unsullied with spears. The last Jaime saw of his sister that morning was her hunched figure being led away, black gown trailing in the dust. The image tore at him despite everything. She was still his sister, bound by blood, but she had become a threat to thousands, and he could not allow that threat to prevail. He turned his attention to the monstrous figure beside him. Gregor Clegane's visor revealed nothing, but there was a subtle shift in his posture, as if he sensed that dawn brought more than just daylight, it brought a new chance. For so long, his life had been death. Now, in a twist of fate, he might repay a fraction of his sins by sparing the city the fiery fate once championed by his own queen. Bronn clapped a hand on Jaime's shoulder, ignoring Gregor's looming presence for a moment. Well, Kingslayer, you've outdone yourself. Stopping not one but two mad monarchs from blowing up the city. I suppose that makes you the hero of King's Landing again. Jaime's lips twisted in a thin smile. I'm no hero. I'm just a man trying to prevent another horror. Bronn snorted. Hero or not, you'll go down in the songs for this. If we survive. Jaime nodded, a slow exhalation of relief and lingering tension. If we survive. They set off, flanked by Unsullied, Gregor's heavy steps echoing behind them. Tyrion walked on Jaime's other side, exchanging hushed words about logistics. They would need to cover a vast area of the city quickly. They'd have to rely on local knowledge from the City Watch, from maps Qyburn had left behind, though many of those were burned or incomplete. Gregor's recollections might be incomplete as well, but it was the best chance they had. As they approached the city gates again, the sun crested the horizon. The pink sky blossomed into pale gold. King's Landing sprawled ahead, uncertain of its fate. With luck and with the help of a monstrous knight who had reclaimed a spark of humanity, they would prevent a cataclysm. As the gates swung open, Jaime looked back once, seeing Daenerys Targaryen's silver hair glint in the morning light as she gave orders to her armies, preparing them to occupy the city peacefully if possible. Then he looked forward into the narrow streets and cluttered alleys he had called home for so many years. All around him was the city's unknowing bustle. People waking, vendors preparing their stalls, children running barefoot in the early sunlight. He realized how close they'd come to obliterating all of this. A city might be corrupt, might be filled with liars and thieves, but it was still life. Life that deserved a chance. Ahead of him, Gregor Clegane slowed, turning that dark visor left and right as if scanning for the potential stashes. The brand on his chest was quiet for now. Perhaps the magic that had enslaved him was fading with its master's death. Perhaps it lingered, a dark echo. Either way, he moved with purpose. Jaime wondered what thoughts lay behind that unyielding helm. Did he recall his sins? Did he regret them? Did he yearn for forgiveness, or was it all just a hollow reflex to break the chains Qyburn had welded around his soul? But the why mattered less than the what. If Gregor could help them save the city, then perhaps that small flicker of redemption would burn bright enough to outshine the evil that had once consumed him. Tyrion broke the silence. Let's start in the dungeons beneath the Red Keep. That's where the largest caches are likely hidden. Bronn smirked. Sure, nothing like a nice day of hauling volatile green goo first thing in the morning. Jaime grimaced at Bronn's irreverence, but he nodded. All right, we'll split into groups. We mark each cache, remove the fuses, and if it's possible, carry the casks outside the city or dump them into the sea where they can't harm anyone. Gregor gave a low grunt, pointing a massive finger toward a side street. Jaime recognized it as the route they had taken the previous night. He's leading us, he said quietly. Follow him. And so they followed the mountain, once the greatest butcher in Westeros, now the key to saving its largest city. The air was filled with the promise of a new day, a day that might have been King's Landing's last if not for a single spark of defiance that had blossomed in the heart of a monster. No one knew precisely how many caches lay scattered through the city. No one knew if a single accidental torch or dropped lantern might ignite them. But as the sun climbed higher, Jaime felt the first stirrings of hope that they might pull this off. The people might be spared the roar of exploding wildfire and the stink of burning flesh. In the midst of that hope, a realization settled over Jaime. For all their talk of power, for all the brutality and cunning he had learned at Tywin's knee, the greatest act of power was sometimes an act of mercy. And in that sense, Gregor Clegane's final turn might be the most merciful and powerful act of his entire wretched life. They pressed on, the city awakening around them, tensions still high. But in the distance, across the rooftops, Jaime glimpsed the rising shape of Daenerys's dragons circling in the air, watchful. He swallowed hard, then continued following Gregor down the winding road, deeper into the underbelly of King's Landing. He didn't know what awaited them in the hours to come. But for once he felt certain of his purpose. Behind him, Bronn hummed a grim tune under his breath. Tyrion walked with purposeful strides, mind undoubtedly racing on how to orchestrate the city's peaceful turnover. And Gregor led them, the towering symbol of monstrous destruction somehow guiding them to salvation. If the gods were watching, Jaime thought, they must be astounded at this twist of fate. And if tomorrow brought a new dawn over an unscorched King's Landing, it would be thanks, in part, to the mountain who, at the brink of the apocalypse, remembered, if only for a fleeting time, what it meant to be human. They pressed on, the city awakening around them in slow, uncertain waves of early light. King's Landing had never been a tranquil place. Even in the quiet hours before dawn, it had always thrummed with the restless energy of a million hopes and fears packed into dense neighborhoods and twisting alleyways. But now, with an army on its threshold and rumors of wildfire in its catacombs, that restlessness had turned to a collective dread. Shopkeepers unlatched doors but kept them only half open, as though prepared to slam them shut at the first whiff of trouble. Beggars and sellswords eyed each other from the shadows of porches. The smell of coal fires and unwashed bodies mingled with an oppressive hush that magnified every distant shout or clang of metal. Jaime guided the group toward one of the lesser-known entrances to the Red Keep's dungeons, a narrow set of stone steps half-concealed behind a collapsed stable. The stable roof had caved in years ago, leaving a tangle of rotted timbers and loose stone. A single guard in Lannister colors waited at the bottom, lantern in hand, though he looked more asleep than awake. At the sound of footsteps, he jerked to attention. He nearly panicked when he recognized the behemoth in black armor, Ser Gregor, the Mountain. But Jaime's presence and the scarlet cloaks of the few Lannister guards who remained loyal to the city's salvation kept him from sounding an alarm. "Sir Jaime," the guard said, stepping aside. "You're here, with him?" He looked uneasily at Gregor's hulking frame. Jaime gave a terse nod. "He won't harm you as long as you keep your torch away from anything suspicious. We've come to make sure the Queen's plan fails." The guard swallowed as if uncertain whether to trust these words. "I heard the Queen was arrested. People say she wanted to burn the city." "She won't get the chance," Jaime answered, moving past him. "Keep watch here. Let no one follow us unless they come from my command or from the hand of the Queen, Tyrion Lannister." The man bowed stiffly, stepping back as the party descended into darkness. They carried their own torches, though they kept the flames low, mere glimmers against the subterranean gloom. Gregor took the lead, and though he made no sound of speech, he guided them with a certain clarity, choosing corridors and descents that most men wouldn't know existed. Now and then he would pause, lifting his visor's slit toward a side passage as if remembering a detail from Qyburn's instructions. His steps were slow, deliberate, and he pointed once or twice at a corridor wall. Jaime, squinting in the torchlight, could see faint chalk marks or smeared footprints from Qyburn's robed assistants, signs that men had passed this way carrying something heavy. Behind them came Tyrion, flanked by half a dozen unsullied soldiers, silent and formidable. They bore no torches, relying on the flickering light that Jaime and Bronn carried. The Sellsword kept close to Jaime's left, a hand on his sword hilt and his expression twisted in half exasperation, half nervousness. "Never did I think I'd spend my morning prying wildfire from the bowels of the city," he muttered under his breath. "But it's better than watching the place go up in green flames." Jaime didn't reply. He just kept his eyes on Gregor's broad back, on the swirl of shadows cast by the monster's armor. 100 stray thoughts fluttered at the edges of Jaime's mind. He remembered the time years ago when the Mad King had stashed barrels of wildfire in these very tunnels. He remembered the night that had forced him to break his King's Guard vows by driving a sword into Aerys's back. Now, in a strange, bitter reflection of that night, he found himself once again in these dank corridors, determined to prevent another mass immolation. Perhaps it was destiny, or perhaps it was punishment for all his sins. Gregor halted at a junction where 3 corridors stretched away in different directions. The temperature here was cooler, and water dripped somewhere in the dark. Old cobwebs hung between rusted torch brackets. Jaime saw Gregor turn his visor slowly, the faint torchlight glinting on the black metal. Then the giant knight pointed down the leftmost path, letting out a soft grunt as though his throat could barely shape the sound. Bronn lifted his torch to see better. "Down that way?" he asked, scanning for any sign of traps. Gregor gave a single nod. Tyrion peered around Jaime, eyes narrowed. "Let's be mindful," Tyrion said softly. "Qyburn's men might have set triggers or hidden fuses." Carefully, they advanced into the left corridor. This one sloped downward, the walls slick with some foul-smelling condensation. The earthen floor gave way to old stone slabs that looked half-rotten. At one point, Gregor stopped, gesturing for Bronn to bring his torch closer. The flicker revealed a thin line of powder or crystals along the edge of the wall. Tyrion crouched, sniffing lightly at the air but stopping short of touching it. "An alchemist's mixture," he said grimly. "Potentially flammable. Let's step over it." They each lifted their feet high, stepping beyond the faint line. The Unsullied followed in single file. Gregor, heavier than any of them, still managed to avoid disturbing the line. In the hush, Jaime could hear his own heartbeat, a dull thud. If that powder was a fuse, even a stray ember might set it off. One spark could awaken the hidden casks, unleashing a chain reaction to reduce half the red keep to rubble. Perhaps the entire city if the tunnels connected widely enough. A few steps later, they found themselves in a small chamber braced by thick wooden beams that looked on the verge of rotting. Gregor raised a gauntlet hand, pointing into the gloom. By the faint light, Jaime discerned several barrels huddled together near the far wall, each marked with the unmistakable alchemical symbol for wildfire. He felt a shiver at the sight. There were at least 6 casks here, all large enough to hold gallons of the deadly substance. Tyrion's gaze swept the chamber. "All right. We remove the fuses first. Then we see if we can cart the casks out." He hesitated. "I suppose we could bring them above ground, but that poses its own risks. The slightest accident." "We can't leave them," Bronn muttered. "Better to dump them in the sea or something. The city's not safe so long as they're down here." Jaime nodded. "There's an old tunnel that leads to the waterside near the Blackwater. If we're careful, we can roll the casks out onto a barge. Let them sink into the deep." Tyrion pressed his lips together. We'll need more manpower for that. A dozen men at least, and a wagon or strong cart. And lots of caution. Grey Worm and the rest are waiting up top, Bronn reminded them. We can send for them. Jaime turned to Gregor. The giant knight stood like an obsidian statue, the torchlight glinting off the black steel of his visor. Gently, as if remembering a faint dream, Gregor moved closer to the barrels. His metal-plated fingers trailed near the edge of one cask's top where the fuse had been hammered in place with wax. He pointed again, a silent directive. Jaime realized Gregor was showing them exactly where the fuse attached and how it might be dismantled. Tyrion frowned. He's more helpful than I dared hope. The hand of the queen approached, rummaging in the small satchel slung over his shoulder. He produced a slender tool, a small knife with a hook tip designed for careful operations. I'll cut away the wax around the fuses. Jaime, shine the torch closer. Jaime obeyed, and together they knelt by the casks. Tyrion's breath was shallow with focus. Bronn stood behind them, hand resting on his sword, as if expecting the casks to explode at any moment. The Unsullied formed a perimeter at the chamber's entrance, their spears angled outward. A hush pressed in on Jaime's ears as Tyrion's knife dug into the wax. Each scrape sounded thunderous in Jaime's head. He braced himself for a sudden hiss of reaction, but nothing came. Tyrion worked patiently, removing the wax in curling flakes until the fuse was exposed as a coiled cord half embedded in the top of the cask. Then Tyrion put away the knife and pulled gingerly, freeing the cord. Within a few minutes he had disconnected the fuses from all 6 casks in that small cluster. He laid them carefully aside, wiping sweat from his brow. That's the worst of it, he said, exhaling. No ignition source means these casks can't detonate spontaneously, though we'd still be fools to jostle them too hard. Bronn peered at them. They must weigh a ton each. Even an ox would think twice about hauling them all at once. We'll need multiple trips. Yes, Tyrion said. We'll mark the location for the others to handle. For now, let's keep searching for more. We have to neutralize every stash before some fanatic tries to reignite them. Gregor emitted a low, raspy grunt, stepping back from the barrels. Jaime still couldn't quite believe he was seeing this creature, once the terror of the 7 kingdoms, acting as a guide in this perilous task. Even in life, Gregor had been known for brutality. In death or undeath, he had been Qyburn's unstoppable slave. But now that chain had broken. Something else moved him. Jaime suspected it was neither pure altruism nor any love for the city, but rather some deeper shift in the shadowed remnants of Gregor's mind. Regardless of the reason, they needed him now. They left the casks behind after Tyrion pinned a note to the rotten wooden support beam, scribbling instructions for any loyal workers or Unsullied who might come next. Return with cart, do not use torches, do not jostle casks. Then they retraced their steps into the corridor, stepping carefully over the alchemist's powder. Beyond that junction, Gregor gestured again toward the central path. They followed, the floor sloping downward even more steeply than before. The air took on a stagnant quality. Jaime caught a whiff of something foul, rotting vegetation or dead rats. Once he slipped on a slick patch of stone and nearly dropped his torch. Had it hit the ground, sparks might have flown in every direction. Just the thought of it tightened every muscle in his body. Bronn helped steady him with a firm grip on his elbow and they exchanged a silent nod. They passed a collapsed archway on their left, choked with rubble. Gregor ignored it, leading them deeper until they reached another cramped space, barely high enough for Jaime to stand upright and so low that Gregor had to hunch. At first, Jaime saw nothing but a few broken crates. Then Gregor reached out and shifted one of those crates aside with surprising delicacy. Underneath lay 2 small casks, each bearing the green symbol. They looked older, dustier, as though they'd been here for some time. Tyrion moved forward. Let's see if these were rigged as well. He crouched with his small knife, carefully brushing dust off the top of one cask. To everyone's relief, there was no visible fuse, just a sealed lid that appeared half-rotten. Probably an earlier stash. Or maybe Qyburn never fully got around to hooking this one up. We can still remove them, though they might be even more unstable if they've been sitting here for years. While Tyrion inspected, Jaime found himself thinking back to the rumor that the Mad King's caches had never been fully purged. Was it possible these were relics from that time? Left to rot in secret so that Qyburn only had to reconnect them? The notion made Jaime's mouth go dry. They secured the 2 small casks, rolling them aside so they wouldn't be stepped on. Tyrion marked the spot as well, scribbling on a scrap of parchment. The group pressed. Twice they encountered dead ends, corridors caved in by time or sabotage. Another branch led to a store of old siege weaponry, rusted catapult parts and worm-eaten scorpions. There, they found no wildfire. But they did find more scattered lines of that alchemist's powder, which suggested Qyburn's men had come through, scoping possible detonation points. Through it all, Gregor remained eerily calm. He never drew a weapon, never made a hostile gesture toward them. He trudged forward, sometimes halting at a crossing, sometimes doubling back. Jamie could only guess at the intangible sense of direction that guided him. Perhaps Qyburn had marched him through these corridors more than once, embedding commands in his mind. Now that Qyburn was gone, the residue of that knowledge lingered like a phantom map. After nearly an hour of slow progress, they emerged into a larger subterranean hall that Jamie recognized with a jolt of unease. It had once been part of Mager's maze of hidden pathways, so cunningly built to confound intruders. Over the centuries, large portions had collapsed or been sealed off. Now, it echoed with dripping water and the scuttle of unseen rats. Their torches revealed a wide floor and a vaulted ceiling supported by columns carved in old Targaryen motifs. Dragons chasing each other's tails. It was grand in its way but also haunting. Near the far end of the hall stood a row of casks. Each was nearly as tall as a man's waist. Jamie counted at least 12. Some were new, shining with fresh wax. Others looked battered, as though reappropriated from older stores. His stomach nodded at the sheer scale. If those casks all ignited, they could well obliterate half the Red Keep in a single monstrous blast. A whisper of fear wound through Tyrion's voice. 7 save us. That's a lot more than I expected. Bronn cursed under his breath. It'll take days to cart all this out. We might not have days. Daenerys's armies are poised to march in at dawn, and the city watch is jumpy. Jamie flexed his golden hand, trying to quell a rising wave of anxiety. At least we know where they are. That's step 1. Gregor moved closer to the casks, each heavy footstep echoing. The Unsullied fanned out behind him. Tyrion motioned for them to stay back. We must handle this gently. I'll see to the fuses. But then he noticed something. An elaborate network of fuses connected many of these casks together in a ring, each fuse coated in some resin that glistened under the torchlight. Careful, Bronn said. Looks more sophisticated than the others. Tyrion nodded, bending over to examine the connections. Qyburn must have put real effort here. If one cask blows, they all blow. He pointed to a thick rope of fuse that led away from the ring, trailing into the darkness near the far wall. That must lead to a main ignition point. Possibly it was meant to be lit from above. There might be a hidden chute or a pipe going up to the castle floors. How do we disarm it? Jamie asked, tension coiling in his chest. Tyrion grimaced. We cut them, same as before. But the fuse is thicker, more stable. We risk friction sparks if we're careless. We should douse it with water first, or some neutralizing agent. Water might help, Bronn said. But let's do it carefully. They had small flasks of water, but nowhere near enough to soak the entire ring of fuses. Tyrion poured what little he had onto a rag, patting at the thick cords until they glistened with wetness. Then, with the same small knife, he began to slice into the cords, wincing each time the blade rubbed. Jamie stood close with the torch, though far enough to reduce the risk of stray embers. Minutes passed in agonizing slowness as Tyrion cut fuse after fuse. The ring was intricate, branching from one cask to the next. The cords had been entwined in cunning knots that threatened to spark if cut improperly. Yet Tyrion's small, deft hands managed it. A few times, Jamie held his breath as the cords frayed with a faint hiss, but no green flame burst forth. Gregor loomed on the periphery, as if keeping guard over this delicate operation. At last, Tyrion rocked back on his heels. I think that's the last of them. They're disconnected from one another. He exhaled shakily. We'll still have to remove the partial stubs inserted into each cask, but the main chain is severed. Bronn gave a nervous chuckle. I need a strong drink after this. Before Tyrion could reply, Gregor made a sudden motion, a raised fist. Jamie felt a jolt of dread, remembering that once, this gesture meant someone was about to die. Now, though, Gregor was signaling them to be silent. Beneath the dripping of water, they heard distant shouts. Footsteps echoed somewhere deeper in the network of tunnels, or perhaps from above. Tyrion wiped sweat from his brow. Could be Lannister guards looking for you, or someone from our side. Or it could be men loyal to Qyburn, though I'd guess most of them scattered after his death. A new voice called from a corridor beyond the far side of the hall. Ser Jaime? Lord Tyrion. It echoed, husky with strain. Jaime recognized it as the voice of a Lannister soldier he'd sent to help spread warnings throughout the keep. "We're here," he shouted back, tension easing slightly. He still gestured for Tyrion and the others to stay behind. Gregor stepped with him, a black sentinel at his side. Within moments, a figure emerged from the gloom. A young soldier wearing Lannister red. He was out of breath, face slick with sweat. "Ser Jaime," he said, bowing quickly. "I've been searching for you, Lord Commander." "Forgive me, I should say Ser Jaime. There's trouble above." Jaime's gut twisted. What kind of trouble? The soldier wiped his brow. Euron Greyjoy's fleet was spotted off the coast, or so the gold cloaks say. Some of his men have come ashore. We think they might be trying to slip into the city. They could cause chaos, maybe set off the wildfire for their own gain. The queen, he paused, swallowing. Well, the former queen. People are confused, hearing she's in chains. Fights are breaking out in the streets. Damn. Jaime exchanged a look with Tyrion, who had come closer. We knew Euron might linger near the bay, but why is he here now? Tyrion smoothed his tunic, frustration flaring in his eyes. He might still be loyal to Cersei, or at least loyal to himself. If he hears she's dethroned, he might think to rescue her or sow more chaos and seize power amid the confusion. Bronn's expression soured. The city's about to be a war zone on top of everything else. And we haven't even removed half these barrels yet. Jaime felt the old stir of battlefield instincts. All right, we'll leave a few men here to guard these casks. The rest of us go up and restore order. Grey Worm and Daenerys's forces might help maintain peace, but the small folk won't necessarily welcome an invading army with open arms. Tyrion nodded. Take the least risk. We can't leave all this wildfire unguarded. If Euron or any other fanatic found it, they could spark a new cataclysm. He turned to the Unsullied. I need a few of you to stay here. Guard these barrels with your lives. No one touches them without my explicit approval. Understood. The Unsullied saluted in silent unison. 4 of them stepped forward. Tyrion pointed at them each in turn. Good. You stay. The rest come with us to the surface. If we can quell the unrest quickly, we might avert a bigger disaster. Jaime looked to Gregor. He should come. If the city sees him, well, they might fear him, but they'll also know he's no longer under Qyburn's command. Tyrion raised a brow. Are you sure? His presence might spark panic. Word has spread that he's turned traitor to Cersei, but the small folk might not see him as a savior. Jaime blew out a breath. Fair point, but he's the best deterrent against Euron's brutes. He glanced at Gregor, who gave a barely perceptible nod as if to say he'd follow. Besides, he's proven he wants to protect the city. Let's keep him close. They moved out, leaving the 4 Unsullied to stand guard around the casks. The young Lannister soldier guided them back through the twisting corridors at a brisk pace. Now that Tyrion had severed the critical fuses, they dared hold their torches a bit higher, walking with more confidence. There were more important fires to douse now. As they climbed a final staircase leading to a side courtyard of the Red Keep, they heard the tumult above. Shouts, the ring of steel, and the crash of something heavy, maybe a wagon overturning. A shrill cry echoed, followed by a chorus of roars in a language Jaime didn't recognize. Could it be the Ironborn? Or some other Sel's words? They emerged into daylight, squinting at the sudden wash of pale sun. The day was well advanced, the sky a watery blue streaked with gray clouds. In the courtyard, a half-dozen Lannister guards were pinned down behind overturned crates, using them as cover. Opposite them stood a ragtag group of men wearing battered leathers and dark cloaks. At the sight of Jaime and Gregor bursting from the staircase, the Lannister guards let out a cheer until they noticed that the monstrous knight wasn't attacking Jaime. Confusion rippled through the men. The strangers, presumably Euron's men, brandished axes and short swords. One, a tall figure with an eye patch, spat at the ground. More Lannisters, he growled, voice rough. We'll cut you down as we cut them down. He lifted an axe, readying a charge. Jaime stepped forward, drawing his sword. I am Jaime Lannister, and this city is under truce. Lay down your arms or face the consequences. A mocking laugh answered him. We heard your precious queen's been taken prisoner. So we're free to do as we please. Bronn muttered, "Oh, for pity's sake." He advanced swiftly, sword at the ready, while two Unsullied flanked him with spears. Gregor strode behind them, armor glinting, dwarfed by no one. The sight of the mountain caused the ire-born marauders to falter, some stepping back involuntarily. But the tall man with the eye patch tried to bluster. "You think that thing scares us?" He hefted his axe. "We serve Euron Greyjoy, the rightful king of the Isles, and He got no further. Gregor lunged with shocking speed for his size. The enormous gauntlet clamped around the man's axe arm, crushing it with a sickening crunch. The Ironborn shrieked in agony, dropping to his knees. The other raiders gawked, uncertain whether to rush to their comrades' aid or flee. Jaime's Lannister guards took the opportunity to surge forward, subduing two men swiftly. Bronn skewered one fellow's leg to keep him from escaping, and an Unsullied spear struck the blade from another's hand. Chaos whirled for a few frantic seconds. Then, in the face of overwhelming force, the Ironborn either collapsed or threw down their weapons. The courtyard settled into uneasy stillness, broken only by the moans of the man whose arm Gregor had shattered. Jaime realized the giant knight could have simply killed him, but he'd opted for the disabling strike. Perhaps that spark of mercy still flickered. "Bind them," Jaime ordered. The Lannister guards scrambled to obey, breathing hard. They recognized Jaime's new authority, no longer the Queen's champion, but the city's savior. They shackled the defeated Ironborn, tying their hands and leading them away. Bronn nudged the collapsed wagons. They were full of stolen goods, silver plates, candlesticks, some casks of wine. "Looks like Euron's men had themselves a looting party. They're testing the city's defenses." "Where's the rest of them?" One guard, panting, said. "They've scattered through the streets. We think they have smaller groups prowling around, taking advantage of the confusion. Civilians are fighting back or running." The city watch is stretched thin. Jaime cursed under his breath. "Where's Grey Worm and the Targaryen forces?" "Spreading out around the gates," the guard said. "But they can't control everything at once." Tyrion appeared behind Jaime, his expression grim. "We need to coordinate. Let's regroup at the Great Hall or the courtyard near the throne room. That might serve as a command post. The city must see that we stand united to defend them." Jaime agreed. He signaled the remaining men to follow, then led the way into the main complex of the Red Keep. They traversed corridors littered with debris, overturned benches, scattered documents, broken lanterns. Every so often they passed frightened servants huddled in alcoves. Jaime told them to find safety, to barricade themselves in a secure chamber until the chaos was subdued. Along the way, they ran into more pockets of violence. Twice, they encountered Ironborn stragglers ransacking storerooms who fled at the sight of Gregor and the Unsullied. Another time, a group of drunken Lannister soldiers was brawling among themselves, apparently uncertain where their loyalties lay without Cersei's iron rule. Jaime seized the moment to assert his new command, barking orders until they reluctantly dropped their weapons. It was a tense, uneasy authority, born of fear and confusion. But it held for now. Eventually, they reached the grand courtyard outside the throne room's massive doors. There, a contingent of Unsullied stood in formation, spears angled outward. Beyond them, Grey Worm conferred with a few Targaryen officers. Upon seeing Jaime's group approach, the Unsullied parted to let them pass. Grey Worm eyed Jaime, Bronn, Gregor, and Tyrion. Behind them, a small mix of Lannister men stood, looking battered but determined. Grey Worm's face was as impassive as ever. "There is fighting in Flea Bottom," he reported in a measured tone. "We have contained the lower gates, but many in the streets are armed. We do not know friend or foe." Jaime nodded. "We'll help. The city watch might be disorganized, but some remain loyal to preventing anarchy. If we coordinate your Unsullied with the watch, we can quell the violence quickly." Tyrion stepped forward. "We also have many barrels of wildfire stashed in the tunnels below. We've neutralized some fuses, but the casks still need to be removed or drowned. We left men guarding the largest cache. The rest must be found and disarmed before any stray fire triggers a disaster." Grey Worm's jaw tightened. "My queen does not wish to burn the city. She waits outside the walls, trusting us to remove these threats before she enters in full. But she grows impatient. If the city cannot be secured peacefully, she may bring the dragons." Jaime looked at Tyrion in alarm. "We can't have dragons breathing fire anywhere near the caches. That's a recipe for the entire city going up in flames." He turned to Grey Worm. "Tell Daenerys we're doing everything possible. We'll restore order and secure the wildfire." Bronn, checking his sword blade for nicks, added, "If she torches King's Landing now, she'll get exactly what she doesn't want, a kingdom of ash." Grey Worm inclined his head slightly, indicating he understood. "I will send word to her. In the meantime, we must push into the worst areas of unrest. They hastily put a plan together. Grey Worms Unsullied would move in squads to each city quarter, accompanied by at least one Lannister guard who knew the streets. Jaime and Tyrion would focus on the Red Keep perimeter, ensuring no more sabotage threatened the wildfire-laden tunnels. Bronn, ever the practical fighter, volunteered to lead a strike against any Ironborn pockets near the docks. Gregor would remain at Jaime's side, in part because his presence alone could deter would-be rioters. In short, they sought to extinguish the city's many small fires, figurative and literal, before dawn fully matured into day. But dawn had already come and gone, and the sun crept higher. The city sizzled with tension. Jaime could almost feel it in the air, that intangible crackle of fear. He remembered the day the people had turned on Joffrey during the bread riots. Chaos in King's Landing was a dragon with many heads, each striking out unpredictably. "Let's go," Tyrion said, adjusting his cloak. "No sense wasting time." They split up. Bronn trotted off with a squad of Unsullied, a roguish grin on his face despite the danger. "Never thought I'd be leading an army to keep the peace," he muttered, half to himself. "But I like living too much to see the city burn." He disappeared into a corridor, the clang of boots echoing behind him. Jaime, Tyrion, Gregor, and a handful of Lannister soldiers took another route. They stepped out of the Red Keep's gates onto the broad thoroughfare that led downhill into the city proper. The Sea of Dothraki might have been visible if Daenerys's horde had approached from the main gates, but they'd chosen to stay outside for now, presumably at Daenerys's command. The occasional gust of wind carried the stench of rotting fish from the harbor, mingling with the dust and sweat of thousands of anxious souls. They found the city watch struggling to hold a small barricade at the base of the hill. A group of Ironborn raiders and local cutthroats had formed a makeshift alliance, brandishing stolen arms. The watchmen, clad in their dull gold cloaks, were outnumbered and about to break. Jaime cursed under his breath and urged his men forward. Gregor led the charge. The sight of the hulking knight in black armor, visor glinting, was enough to send some cutthroats scattering. Others, emboldened by desperation or ignorance, rushed forward with yells. Gregor seized the nearest man by the chest, hurling him back into the crowd. The man crashed into two of his companions, tangling limbs in a flailing heap. Jaime waited in, sword flashing. He parried a clumsy strike and landed a pommel strike that knocked the fight out of his attacker. The Lannister soldiers flanked him, swiftly subduing others. Tyrion stayed behind the line, shouting for the watchmen to hold steady. When the raiders saw Gregor crush a second man's ribcage with a single blow, they lost much of their nerve. Many dropped weapons, some fled outright, weaving between the cramped buildings. The city watch, rallying at Jaime's command, chased down a few. It was a messy skirmish, but over in minutes. No one wanted to stand against an undead giant with a sword arm the size of an oak trunk. When it was done, the watch captain approached Jaime, breathing hard. "Thank the gods you came. We've been trying to keep order, but half our men don't know who's in charge. Some say the queen is dethroned, others say it's a lie. It's chaos." Jaime's jaw clenched. "It's true. Cersei has been arrested. We're saving the city from a plan to blow it sky high. Spread the word, the city watch is under the authority of Tyrion Lannister, Hand of the Queen, Queen Daenerys Targaryen. She does not wish to harm the people. We must keep the peace." The watch captain's eyes widened at the mention of Daenerys. "Targaryen? The small folk have heard tales. Dragons, Dothraki, all that. People are frightened. We're trying to avoid violence," Tyrion said calmly. "Help us do that, Captain. If your men see any Ironborn or other raiders, arrest them. If they won't surrender, put them down quickly. We also need your help patrolling near the city's hidden cellars or catacombs. Any sign of suspicious barrels with green markings, mark them and send word to us." The captain bowed, though confusion flickered in his eyes. "As you say, my lord." He mustered what remained of his men. They marched off to secure the next street, leaving the thoroughfare momentarily clear. Already, a few curious commoners peered from shuttered windows. Tyrion turned to Jaime. "We'll continue patrolling. The less bloodshed, the better. And let's hop. We locate any remaining pockets of wildfire before someone tries to spark them." Gregor lingered at Jaime's side, silent. His steel boots glinted in the daylight. Sometimes Jaime thought he glimpsed something stirring behind that visor, a glimmer of old torment or new resolve, but it was impossible to be sure. The mountain did not speak. He only fought when needed and otherwise stood immovable. They moved on, weaving through King's Landing's labyrinth of streets. The day wore on. Under Jaime's direction, the city watch and the Unsullied gradually quelled the scattered outbreaks of fighting. Most raiders surrendered when confronted with the combined might of disciplined soldiers. A few died with swords in their hands, refusing to yield. Fires that had broken out in a couple of shops were quickly doused by locals who recognized that no one would benefit from a citywide blaze. Little by little, the chaos receded, leaving behind only the jangled nerves of a population that had glimpsed how close they'd come to destruction. Afternoon light slanted across the rooftops. Tyrion, cheeks flushed from exertion, wiped sweat from his brow as they neared the street of steel. No sign of Euron himself, he muttered. Just his rabble. Where might he be? Bronn's arrival answered that question moments later. The Sellsword appeared, escorting a wounded city watchman and followed by a small group of Unsullied. Bronn's sword was streaked with blood, but he walked with that casual swagger Jaime recognized. We cornered another pocket of Qyburn near the docks, he reported, voice terse. They're holed up in a warehouse, with Euron barking orders like a mad dog. He's got about 20 men, maybe more. We'd have stormed them, but we didn't want to risk a bloodbath among the innocent folk hiding in there. Jaime nodded grimly. Then we'll go to him. Put an end to this madness. Tyrion eyed Gregor, who stood silently, massive arms folded across his chest plate. He could help. The sight of the mountain might break Euron's confidence. I'm all for it, Bronn said with a dry smile. But watch your back. Euron's always been a cunning one, and he might have a trick or two. So they set off toward the harbor district. By then, the main thoroughfares were under relative control thanks to combined city watch and Unsullied patrols. Groups of frightened small folk huddled in corners, watching the passing soldiers with wide, uncertain eyes. Some spat curses at the mention of a Targaryen army. Others whispered prayers that the rumored wildfire wouldn't blow them to smithereens. They reached the old warehouse district by mid-afternoon. A row of stone buildings fronted the water, used mostly for storage of grain, textiles, and imported goods. Several had been battered in the wars, with windows boarded up. Euron's men had apparently chosen one of the larger, sturdiest structures as their fortress. City watchmen and a few Unsullied crouched behind crates in a makeshift barricade across the street from the warehouse. Arrows occasionally zipped through the air. The watchers nodded in relief when Jaime approached. Lord Jaime, one watchman said, ducking a crossbow bolt that clattered off a crate. They've barricaded themselves inside. We saw Euron on the upper floor, leaning out a window, shouting insults. Bronn raised an eyebrow. He always did love an audience. Jaime signaled them to hold their positions. He and Tyrion stepped forward cautiously, accompanied by Gregor, who loomed menacingly. An arrow whistled from an upper window, but it soared wide, burying itself in a beam far from the trio. They pressed on, brazenly exposing themselves in the street. Jaime lifted his golden hand in a universal gesture for parley. Inside, he heard coarse laughter and scuffling feet. Then, in the second-story window, a tall figure leaned out. Euron Greyjoy, flamboyant even now, wore a coat of dark leather etched with swirling motifs, his beard braided with beads of silver. A battered kraken sigil was stitched across his chest, its edges fraying. Ah, the Kingslayer, Euron crooned, mocking delight in his tone. Or should I say the Queenslayer? Word on the wind is you've turned on your sister. He laughed, hollow and loud. I knew you Lannisters were a twisted lot, but I never guessed you'd shackle Cersei like a mad dog. Jaime held his temper, calling up, Euron Greyjoy, your men are beaten, scattered. Drop your weapons and surrender. You might yet live to see another day. Surrender to you? Euron sneered. To the crippled lion who can't decide which queen he serves? I'd rather feed my balls to the gulls. We've heard enough rumors. Cersei's in chains, Daenerys is waiting with her dragons. You're all playing at kings and queens. Let's see if your new Targaryen mistress can stomach a bit of blood. He gestured behind him and another crossbow bolt flew from a different window. Jaime barely had time to flinch before Gregor shifted, raising an armored forearm. The bolt ricocheted off his plate. Euron laughed again. You brought the walking corpse with you, I see. Good luck with that. We have barrels of oil and we're not afraid to burn this place down. Who knows, maybe the wildfire will do the rest. One spark in the right spot and it's all ash. Tyrion shouted back, you'll kill yourselves in the process, idiot. Do you really think that's wise? Euron grinned, eyes dancing with manic glee. Wise? Who cares about wise? This world belongs to those with the nerve to seize it. I've seized many treasures. Now, if the city goes up in smoke, it goes. I'll sail away or die in the attempt. Better to go out in a blaze than kneel to a silver-haired usurper. Jaime ground his teeth. Euron was as reckless as ever, perhaps more so now that his position was hopeless. The possibility that Euron might actively try to ignite hidden wildfire around the city twisted Jaime's stomach. We can't let him roam free, Jaime muttered to Tyrion. We need to end this fast. Gregor's massive hand rested on Jaime's shoulder as if volunteering. Tyrion eyed the warehouse. If we charge inside, some of our men could get killed. He might have traps set or hidden archers. He glanced at Gregor. But if the mountain leads, they might lose heart quickly. Braun joined them, having crawled closer under the crates. I say we flank them. Send a squad around the back. Maybe set a distraction out front, have Gregor break down the door. Then the rest of us slip in through a window or rear entrance. Corner Qyburn before he can do anything drastic. Jamie considered it. Let's do it. We'll keep it simple. I'll lead the front assault with Gregor. Tyrion, you coordinate the flanking move. Let's try to capture Qyburn alive if possible. He might know about any last wildfire stashes we've missed. If he refuses to yield, Jamie's mouth set into a grim line. We do what must be done. They swiftly arranged the plan. Half the watchmen crept around the warehouse block, guided by Braun, searching for a rear entrance. Jamie, Gregor, Tyrion, and the remaining men prepared a frontal assault. At Jamie's signal, they'd dash across the open street, shielded as best they could by the crates, and attempt to breach the heavy wooden doors. Arrows would fly, but hopefully the defenders would be too distracted by the front to notice the infiltration at the back. Moments later, Jamie nodded to Gregor. The hulking knight hefted a huge wooden plank that a watchman had pried loose from a broken cart. Under the glare of the midday sun, Jamie raised his sword. Charge, he roared. They leapt from cover, sprinting toward the warehouse doors. Immediately, arrows whistled down. One bounced off Gregor's pauldron. Another grazed a Lannister guard who stumbled but kept running. Jamie heard Euron's muffled laughter from above. Then Gregor swung the plank at the doors with bone-crunching force. The impact rattled the entire structure, but it held. It was barred from within, perhaps reinforced with iron. Gregor struck again. Wood splintered, a chunk flying free. A third blow. The door cracked open enough for them to glimpse men inside, scrambling with spears to hold it shut. Jamie lunged forward, sliding his sword between the cracked planks. He twisted, hooking the bar from the inside. Another guard joined in, pushing. The defenders shouted curses, trying to brace the door. Then Gregor hammered the plank again, the door burst inward with a shriek of tortured hinges, and the melee began. Inside, half a dozen Ironborn tried to form a defensive line. The space was cramped, crates stacked on either side. Dust motes whirled in the air, and the tang of brine from the harbor mingled with sweat. Jamie crashed into the first man, parrying a savage slash and responding with a quick thrust that caught the Ironborn in the thigh. The man howled, toppling. Another attacker lunged for Jamie's back, but Gregor snatched him by the collar and hurled him aside like a rag doll, sending him crashing into a stack of barrels. Tyrion and two Lannister guards pressed in, swords raised. They engaged the next cluster of Euron's men. Blades clanged, curses rang out. Above them, from the loft or upper level, arrows rained down sporadically. Jamie sidestepped, narrowly avoiding one that embedded in the wooden floor. The clangor of the fight echoed. Suddenly, from behind a tall stack of crates, Euron Greyjoy emerged, brandishing a curved sword. He grinned, teeth bared in a predatory snarl. "Come, Kingslayer," he shouted above the din, "let's see if you're as good as they say." Jamie turned, sword at the ready. The clang of weapons around them seemed to fade for a moment, as if the entire warehouse narrowed its focus on their duel. Euron lunged, blade whistling. Jamie deflected, sparks flying. Euron's strength was formidable, fueled by arrogance and mania. Jamie sidestepped, golden hand raised in a blocking posture, steel sword in the other. He parried twice, but Euron's speed was surprising, each strike a cunning feint turning into a slash. Gregor was busy fighting two Ironborn at once, so Jamie had no immediate help. He faced Euron alone, heart-pounding. Memories of countless battles flickered behind his eyes. He'd faced champions in tournaments, real killers in battles. Euron was something else, unpredictable, savage, with a wild grin that never left his face. Jamie recognized that grin as the hallmark of a man who thrived on chaos. "You sided with that dragon whore, didn't you?" Euron sneered, pressing an attack that forced Jamie back against a toppled crate. "You betray your sister for her? Maybe you fancy betting a Targaryen. Heard you had a taste for incest. Another flavor might suit you." Jamie clenched his jaw, ignoring the taunts. He angled his blade, letting Euron's next thrust slip aside. With a riposte, Jamie scored a cut along Euron's ribcage, drawing blood. Euron snarled, stumbling back a half-step. "That's it," he hissed. "You fight like a crippled pup." He kicked a small crate at Jamie's legs, forcing him to step aside. Euron seized the moment to slash overhead. Jamie lifted his blade in time, but the impact numbed his forearm. He cursed, pivoted, and brought his golden hand up to strike Euron in the face. It connected with a dull thud, sending Euron staggering. Blood dripped from his nose, but he only laughed louder. All around, the warehouse erupted into final skirmishes. The city watch poured in from the front door while Bronn's flanking group forced a rear entrance. Qyburn were caught in a pincer and their morale broke. Some screamed in surrender, dropping weapons. Others fought to the bitter end, cornered among crates. But Euron had eyes only for Jaime. He spat blood, lunging again. Jaime met him blow for blow until Euron abruptly changed tactics. He bashed Jaime's sword with an upward strike, then drove forward to grapple. They tumbled against a stack of rope coils, Euron's face inches from Jaime's. The reek of stale ale and salt filled Jaime's nostrils. Euron pinned Jaime's sword arm, sneering, "Didn't think I'd die in a stinking warehouse." Jaime grimaced, straining. He still had some leverage with his golden hand. He slammed it forward, striking Euron's temple. The blow dazed the pirate lord, loosening his grip. Jaime twisted free, hooking a leg behind Euron's ankle and sending him crashing to the floor. The clang of Euron's sword echoed. Jaime loomed over him, sword tip at Euron's throat. For a moment, Euron lay there, panting, eyes blazing with hatred. Then he barked a harsh laugh. "Go on, Lannister. Kill me. Seems you have a knack for murdering kings, queens, and everything in between. Why not a pirate, too?" Jaime hesitated, blade trembling. Part of him wanted to end Euron for all the misery he'd caused. But another part remembered Tyrion's words. Euron might know something about any last wildfire stashes. Or perhaps there was a faint hope he could be turned. Jaime pressed the tip a fraction deeper, drawing a crimson bead on Euron's neck. "Yield," Jaime said. "Or die." Euron's grin was savage. "I yield to no one." He spat at Jaime's feet. Jaime ground his teeth. In that instant, Gregor appeared behind Jaime, looming over them both. Euron caught sight of the mountain, and for the first time, real fear flickered in his eyes. You're not Cersei's dog anymore," he muttered, half in awe, half in terror. Gregor reached down, grabbing Euron by the collar and hoisting him upright with effortless force. Euron struggled, cursing, but he was pinned like a rag doll in Gregor's iron grip. Tyrion stepped forward a few yards away, panting. "He's worth more alive," Tyrion said, though he looked as though it pained him to say it. "He might have knowledge we need." Jaime nodded slowly. "Bind him. Watch him closely." He lowered his sword, chest heaving. Gregor complied, manacling Euron with a spare pair of iron shackles that a watchman handed over. Euron snarled, thrashing like a wild dog, but Gregor's grip was unyielding. Blood stained Euron's side from the cut Jaime had inflicted. His face was bruised from the blow of the golden hand. Despite that, defiance still burned in his gaze. Around them, the fighting in the warehouse had subsided. Bronn and the watchmen mopped up the last pockets of resistance. Several Qyburn lay dead or wounded on the floor. A few survivors were dragged away in chains, cursing or weeping. A handful of watchmen had fallen, too, though the final casualty count was still unclear. The air was thick with dust and the coppery tang of blood. Outside, the sun burned high, washing the city in harsh midday light. Tyrion slipped around the crates, scanning the carnage. "He's the last leader of that particular threat," he said softly. "We should bring him before the queen. Let Daenerys decide his fate." Jaime, sword still in hand, eyed Euron. "I doubt she'll be merciful. Not after the Iron Fleet and the chaos he's caused." Euron spat, a fleck of blood and saliva hitting the floor. "I'd laugh if you think some dragon queen frightens me." No one bothered to respond. Jaime gestured to a pair of watchmen. "Take him outside, keep him under guard. If he tries anything, kill him." Gregor nodded in agreement, releasing his iron grip only after the watchman had seized Euron by both arms. The pirate was dragged off, cursing them in half a dozen languages. At last, the warehouse fell silent, save for the groans of the wounded. Jaime ran a hand through his damp hair, feeling the weight of exhaustion settling on his shoulders. He looked around. The city watch was rummaging for spoils or checking for wounded. Bronn approached, wiping sweat from his brow. "Well, that's one more problem off our plate. Surprised you let him live." Jaime's voice was flat. "We're not butchers, no matter what the songs say." "Speak for yourself," Bronn said with a shrug, though he didn't argue the decision. "Your sister's in chains, Euron's in chains. Seems all of us are in chains of one sort or another, even that big lug." He flicked his gaze to Gregor. Gregor stood near the broken doors, stoic and silent. The bright sun framed his silhouette, giving him a near-mythic aura. Tyrion eyed him with thoughtful wariness. "He's proven his worth today. But what happens when all is settled? Is there a place for him in the new world?" "That's for Daenerys to decide," Jaime said quietly. "And for him to accept if he truly can." He drew a breath, trying to chase away the weariness gnawing at his bones. "For now, we must ensure the city is safe. The wildfire is still down there, waiting to be removed. Cersei must be tried. Daenerys must be crowned or recognized, whatever shape her reign will take. It's a new world we're walking into. Tyrion nodded. Let's not keep her waiting too long. He turned to Bronn. Secure the warehouse. Gather any contraband or stolen goods. Then join us at the Red Keep. We'll bring Euron and any high-value prisoners. Daenerys will want them under close guard. Bronn waved a hand. Fine. I'll be there soon enough. Jaime, Tyrion, Gregor, and a small escort departed the warehouse. Outside, the day had taken on a stark clarity. A breeze blew in from the bay, carrying a tang of salt and seaweed that clashed with the stale sense of blood and sweat lingering on the city's main streets. But the chaos was fading. With Euron's defeat, one more threat had been quelled. Now, only the memory of what might have been lingered in the corners, the specter of wildfire that could still destroy them all if they grew complacent. They trudged back toward the Red Keep. Along the way, they saw signs that the City Watch and Unsullied had done their jobs, fewer mobs in the streets, more people emerging from hiding, some shops tentatively reopening. A hush still hung over everything, the hush of a populace uncertain if the worst was truly over. But at least no plumes of smoke marred the sky. As they ascended the final slope to the keep's gate, Jaime paused to stare out at the horizon. In the distance, beyond the city walls, he spotted the faint shimmer of Daenerys's encampment. Even from here, he thought he saw the silhouette of a dragon wing circling overhead. His breath caught. Would that wing one day cast a shadow of peace or of terror over King's Landing? They stepped inside the keep's courtyards. The place was far more orderly now. Groups of Unsullied patrolled with silent efficiency, while scattered pockets of Lannister men had either surrendered or joined the cause. Tyrion led them to the throne room, its tall doors open to let in the afternoon light. Inside, a cluster of advisors, both Targaryen and newly converted Lannister loyalists, busied themselves with parchment and hushed conversations. But Jaime's eyes fixed on the center of the room, Daenerys Targaryen herself, standing near the Iron Throne. She had not seated herself there yet. Instead, she stood in stern poise, flanked by Grey Worm on one side and Missandei on the other. Around them were a handful of knights, City Watch officers, and two dragon-scale armored figures who must have flown in with her. The tension in the air was palpable, but not as thick as open war. It was more the tension of a realm in transition, uncertain of the new shape it would take. Daenerys's gaze swept the newcomers. She spotted Jaime, Tyrion, and Gregor. Her brows lifted slightly at the sight of the mountain. Then she turned to a cluster of Unsullied who dragged Euron into the throne room. He was bruised, bleeding from his side, but still wearing that mocking grin. Behind him, Lannister guards escorted him firmly. Grey Worm's hand tightened around his spear. "Your Grace," he said to Daenerys, "the pirate Euron Greyjoy. Captured by Ser Jaime." Euron spat. The self-righteous half-wit managed to get lucky. That's all. A flicker of annoyance crossed Daenerys's face. She studied Euron coolly. "You caused trouble enough for my fleet. Tell me why I should not feed you to my dragons." Euron shrugged as best he could with his arms pinned behind him. "Might be the only interesting meal your dragons have all day." Tyrion stepped forward, ignoring Euron's jibe. "Your Grace, he may have knowledge of hidden allies, secret stashes, or other traps set by Cersei. Could be valuable." Daenerys regarded Euron without warmth. "Very well. Lock him in a secure cell for now. We will see if he has anything worth hearing. If not, Rhaegal and Drogon haven't fed in hours." She turned to Grey Worm, who nodded and signaled for the Unsullied to drag Euron away. The pirate snarled half-coherent curses until he was gone. Jaime exhaled, stepping closer to the Queen. He bowed stiffly. "Your Grace, the city is largely under control. We've seized or scattered the Ironborn who tried to sow chaos. Cersei's loyal forces have disbanded. The City Watch is cooperating." Daenerys studied him. "And the wildfire?" Tyrion answered. "We've neutralized several caches, removing or cutting the fuses. But the barrels remain. They must be removed carefully. We have men guarding them to ensure no one tries anything foolish." Daenerys's lips formed a tight line. "My thanks for your service. I would prefer to avoid ruling a heap of cinders." She cast a glance at Gregor, standing in the gloom behind Jaime. "And this one? He has truly turned against Cersei." Jaime nodded. "Without him, we couldn't have found half the caches. He fought off Qyburn's control." Daenerys's gaze flicked to Grey Worm. "See that he is watched but not harmed. Once the city is stable, we will decide his fate." For now, he may continue to aid in the disposal of Wildfire. Grey Worm took note, though his expression suggested discomfort at harboring such a monster in their midst. Jaime couldn't blame him. Gregor Clegane's deeds were infamous across the seas. Daenerys turned to Missandei, who quietly held a scroll. Summon the lords and knights within the city to the throne room. We will hold an assembly to clarify the new order. Spread the word to the small folk. The war is ended, the city is safe, and I will soon address them from the steps of the Red Keep. Missandei nodded and slipped away to carry out the order. Daenerys fixed her violet eyes on Jaime again. As for your sister, I trust she remains in chains. She does, Jaime said, voice tight. We await your decision on her. A hush settled over the hall. Daenerys's face revealed nothing but a calm severity. She will stand trial for her crimes. The Wildfire plot, the murder of innocents, and all else. Tyrion will oversee the proceedings as Hand of the Queen, though a council of lords can bear witness. Justice must be seen to be done. Jaime's throat tightened. He wasn't naive enough to expect mercy for Cersei, not after the chaos she had unleashed. Yet a small part of him remembered their youth, the bond they once had, and felt an ache. Tyrion stood quietly, gazing at Jaime with sympathy. Daenerys moved closer to the Iron Throne, though she did not sit. Her fingertips brushed the cold metal. This city belongs to the future now, not to the ghosts of old power. Let us see if we can shape it into something worthy. She turned, her cloak swirling. For that to happen, the people need hope. Tyrion, make certain the food stores are open to feed the hungry. Jaime, help him manage the city watch and keep the peace. We will have no more anarchy. She paused, eyes flicking to Gregor. And see that all traces of Wildfire are gone before the sun sets on the morrow. I do not want to spend a single night under such a threat. Jaime bowed. Yes, your grace. So it was that the city began the painstaking process of rebirth. Tyrion sent out heralds announcing that Daenerys Targaryen sought to spare the innocent and bring a new age of fairness to King's Landing. The City Watch, newly instructed, opened the granaries under guard, of course, to distribute bread to the hungry. Unsullied patrols helped quell any lingering pockets of fear or raiders. Meanwhile, Jaime oversaw the systematic removal of the Wildfire caches, leading squads of men through subterranean tunnels. Gregor was indispensable, pointing out hidden vaults that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. Each cask was carefully rolled onto carts lined with sand and sacks of straw to prevent jolts. Then they were hauled through side gates, accompanied by dozens of watchful guards, and loaded onto barges that ferried them out into the deep waters beyond the Blackwater Bay. There, men in small boats gently tipped the barrels overboard, letting them sink into the cold darkness, out of reach of sparks and madness. It was a slow, nerve-wracking labor. One misstep could have spelled disaster. But as the afternoon waned, cask by cask, the city was cleansed of its hidden menace. By sundown, Jaime stood on the shore near the harbor, watching the last barge push off. The golden reflection of the setting sun rippled across the water, strangely serene after the day's chaos. Tyrion joined him, a weary satisfaction in his voice. I believe that's the last of it, unless Qyburn hid more we never learned of. Let's hope not, Jaime replied. Gregor didn't indicate any others. Tyrion's mouth quirked. Never thought I'd rely on that monster as a guide to saving King's Landing. He sighed, glancing at Jaime. We did it, brother. We saved them. And now begins a new era. Jaime inclined his head, watching the barge recede until it was no more than a black speck. New era, he echoed. Under Daenerys. Yes, Tyrion said softly. We shall see how she rules. She wants to be a just queen. That's more than most. Jaime nodded, though his thoughts drifted to Cersei. Soon enough, she'd stand trial. And what would that trial look like? Would the lords demand her head on a spike? Would the small folk cry for her blood, or would they remember her as the queen who tried to kill them all? He knew the outcome was practically certain. There'd be no last-minute rescue, no cunning plan to escape. She was caged, powerless, hated by many. Yet the knowledge of her inevitable doom settled heavily on Jaime's heart. He turned away from the horizon, heading back up to the Red Keep. The walk was long, but the city's mood felt calmer now, less like a wound festering and more like a bruise beginning to heal. Those in the streets seemed wary but not panicked. Some even nodded respectfully when they recognized Jaime. Word must have spread that he'd helped prevent the destruction. A few murmured, thank you, or bless you, as he passed. At the keep's gates, Unsullied saluted him. He entered the courtyard and found it lit by torches against the gathering twilight. Missandei approached, her expression courteous. Sir Jaime, the Queen requests your presence in the throne room. She's about to address the assembled lords. Your brother is there as well. Jaime nodded. With a weary sigh, he proceeded inside, Gregor following at a discreet distance. The undead knight's heavy footsteps echoed on the flagstones, prompting nervous stares from a few Targaryen advisors. But no one dared bar his way. He was still needed, at least until the realm was fully stabilized. In the throne room, rows of lords and ladies stood in uneasy clusters. Many were minor nobles from the Crownlands, some from the Reach, even a few from the Stormlands who'd arrived by chance or had remained after the last war. Jaime recognized a handful he'd seen at court during Tommen's reign. They whispered among themselves, casting anxious looks at Daenerys Targaryen, who stood at the base of the Iron Throne, her posture regal and composed. Tyrion stood to her right, Grey Worm to her left. A hush fell as Jaime took his place among them. Gregor halted a few paces behind him, a silent sentinel. Daenerys swept her gaze over the gathering. Lords and ladies of the realm, she began, her voice carrying clearly in the vaulted chamber. I stand before you not as a conqueror, but as a queen determined to spare you from further bloodshed. Today we removed the last remnants of wildfire from beneath your streets. Your city breathes freely again. Some lords murmured, uncertain whether to cheer or remain silent. Daenerys continued, Cersei Lannister attempted to destroy King's Landing rather than relinquish her crown. She conspired with Qyburn to place casks of wildfire that could have killed tens of thousands. But good men and women rose against that madness, Jaime Lannister, Tyrion Lannister, and many soldiers loyal to the safety of the people. Because of them, you stand here alive. An undercurrent of relief and gratitude rippled through the crowd. A few heads turned toward Jaime. He kept his face composed, though he felt the weight of their stares. Daenerys let the moment linger, then continued. Now I claim the Iron Throne. A new era begins, an era where the people's well-being will not be sacrificed by the whims of madness or cruelty. I have come to break the wheel of tyranny. That wheel was nearly drowned in wildfire. No more. She turned slightly and the torchlight gleamed on her silver-gold hair. Cersei Lannister will face trial for her crimes. Many of you saw her cruelty firsthand. Some served her loyally only to be betrayed by her final plan of destruction. Fear not, I will not punish those who surrendered peacefully. I ask only that you swear fealty to me and to the realm we will build together, a realm that does not reward treachery, a realm that cares for its people. Soft exhalations, nods of acceptance. One by one, some of the lords knelt. A few hesitated, but the presence of Unsullied in the hall, along with the memory of how close they'd come to annihilation, convinced them. One older lord, a gaunt, if Jaime remembered correctly, stepped forward and went to one knee, voice trembling. We serve the rightful queen. The rest followed, kneeling in a wave of submission if only to avoid the fate of defiance. Daenerys nodded, her expression solemn. Rise then. Serve me with honesty and you shall prosper. They stood, uncertain, but a flicker of hope lit some of their faces. Daenerys turned to Tyrion. You will remain hand of the queen to guide me in rebuilding the city and the Seven Kingdoms. We have much work ahead, feeding the hungry, restoring order, forging a lasting peace. Tyrion inclined his head. I shall do my best, your grace. Her eyes shifted to Jaime. And you, Sir Jaime, have proven your willingness to protect the innocent, even at great personal cost. As we move forward, I ask that you continue serving the realm. Will you? Jaime bowed. I will, your grace. The words felt weighty on his tongue as though ushering in a final severance from his old life. Daenerys acknowledged him, then addressed the hall again. The trial of Cersei Lannister will take place on the morrow. Let all who wish to witness it gather here. The truth of her crimes shall be laid bare, and justice, at last, shall be done. A murmur swept the hall, a mix of anticipation and dread. The queen's gaze fell upon the lords again. Tonight, return to your dwellings. See that your people rest. Tomorrow, we begin anew. With that, she dismissed the assembly. The lords and ladies filed out, some chattering about the extraordinary events, others solemn. As the throne room emptied, Tyrion exhaled, rolling his shoulders. That's done. At least for now. Jaime stood beside him, feeling the chill in the massive chamber. Yes. We'll see if the lords hold to their pledges when next crisis looms. They'll hold, Daenerys said firmly, coming toward them. Or they'll face the consequences. There has been enough war. Grey Worm approached, silent, but his expression was watchful. Daenerys studied Jaime. I would speak with my hand and with you privately. Come. Jaime followed her and Tyrion, leaving Grey Worm and Gregor behind. The queen led them into a small antechamber where a single torch burned. The room was devoid of ornament, containing only a table and a few chairs. Outside, through a narrow window, the sky glowed with the last embers of sunset. Daenerys turned, her posture regally straight. I have questions about your sister. Is she truly mad enough that no plea for mercy will sway her? Jaime braced himself. She's cunning, manipulative. But yes, she intended to burn the city. She won't feel remorse. She might attempt to beg or threaten or twist words in tomorrow's trial, but she'll never show genuine regret. Daenerys nodded, lips pressed tight. I will hear her speak, though I doubt I'll believe her. Tyrion arranged the formalities. Lords to stand as witnesses, evidence presented of her plan to unleash wildfire, and so forth. Tyrion inclined his head. I will gather all the proof needed. Qyburn's notes, the testimony of the men who placed the casks, Ser Gregor's knowledge if necessary, though we'll have to see how to present it. And Jaime's testimony. Daenerys's gaze flicked from Tyrion to Jaime. Yes, your testimony will carry weight. You are her brother, but you thwarted her. Are you prepared to speak the truth even if it seals her fate? Jaime felt a pang, a subtle twisting of old loyalty. But he steeled himself. I am. She would have murdered thousands. Daenerys studied his face, seeming to measure his resolve. Then she placed a hand on his shoulder in an uncharacteristic gesture of empathy. I know what it is to lose those you love. I lost my family, my child, my closest friends. But sometimes the realm must come first, especially when the person you once loved has become a threat to everyone else. Jaime didn't trust himself to speak, so he merely bowed his head. Tyrion let the silence linger before clearing his throat softly. We'll prepare everything for dawn. The city deserves swift closure. Very well, Daenerys said. She stepped back, summoning her regal bearing once more. Thank you both. I will see you in the morning. You were dismissed. They left the antechamber, each lost in private thoughts. The corridors of the Red Keep were quieter now, patrolled by a mixture of Unsullied and City Watch. Tyrion parted ways with Jaime, heading to organize the trial's logistics, securing a dais, summoning scribes, witnesses, and so forth. Jaime found himself walking alone, the torches casting shifting shadows on the walls. He passed a handful of Targaryen soldiers who eyed him curiously but let him be. At length, he reached a small balcony overlooking the city. He stepped out into the mild night air. The memory of the day's events coursed through him. The city below was calmer now, lanterns glowing in windows, a hush of recovery after the near catastrophe. Above, the stars shimmered. He rested his golden hand on the balcony rail, the cool stone grounding him. A soft shuffle made him turn. Gregor Clegane stood in the shadows, having followed Jaime like a looming specter. Jaime had half expected him to remain near the queen or be escorted to some guard post, but apparently the mountain was still attached to the one whose instructions he best understood. They said nothing, for Gregor's powers of speech were almost non-existent now. But Jaime sensed a strange kinship in that moment, a man who had lost everything he once stood for, forging a new path. Gregor might be more monster than man, but that spark of free will guided him, however faintly. Jaime felt the weight of the past pressing upon them both. The story of the mountain was a story of horrors, brutality, and blind servitude. Could a single day of saving the city atone for that? Likely not. But it was something. Jaime resumed gazing at the city lights. He thought of the trial to come, the faces of the lords in attendance, the final judgment that loomed like an executioner's blade. He thought of Tyrion, who had once killed their father to save himself and now might seal Cersei's fate. He thought of Daenerys, trying to build a better realm on the ashes of old tyrannies. And he thought of himself, the so-called Kingslayer, whose vow to protect the innocent had led him down this winding path, from King Aerys' corpse to the brink of the city's destruction and finally to this precarious dawn. The night wind stirred his hair, whispering like a distant lullaby. Far off, he imagined he heard the cry of a dragon on the wind. Tomorrow, he would face the greatest reckoning of all, condemning the sister he had once loved beyond reason. Tomorrow, the city would see if Daenerys truly brought justice or if more blood would stain the throne. For now, he stood on this balcony, his silent sentinel at his side, and listened to the hush of a city on the cusp of change. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the night air wash over him, letting himself believe, if only for a moment, that all the horrors of the day had been necessary to earn this fragile peace. The ghosts of the past lingered at the edges of his mind, reminding him that peace was never truly permanent, that the shadows of vengeance and ambition might soon rise again. But at least for this moment King's Landing stood intact. Thousands lived who would have died in flame. And somewhere deep within his heart, Jaime Lannister hoped that perhaps, at long last, he had done something that made him more than the Kingslayer. He stood now as a defender of the living, a man who, however flawed, had refused to let the city burn. In the darkness behind him, Gregor Clegane breathed like a distant echo of mortality. Tomorrow would test them all again. But tonight, the city drew a collective breath, relieved that the fires had not claimed it. For the first time in an age, King's Landing had been saved by those once sworn to destroy and by a monster who had found, in his darkest hour, the faint spark of human choice.